Is there a second?
Let's call the roll first.
It's been moved and supported.
Let's Counsel, we
She's
should
here.
call the roll first. Oh, there she is.
Okay.
She's here.
Oh, she's here. Okay. All right.
Null and void.
Well, would you call the roll, please, clerk?
Councilmember Wilcoxon,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Present.
Councilmember Somerville,
Present.
Mayor Richardson,
Present.
Councilmember Morgan,
Present.
Councilmember Simmons,
Present. Sorry, just working on my video.
Councilmember Jones Chance.
Present.
Is all present, there is a quorum.
All right, thank you.
The next on the agenda is agenda approval.
Do we have a motion for approval of agenda, or are there any changes?
I make a motion to approve the agenda if there's no changes.
1 second. I have that. I guess I was going to pull the second reading out, but I don't have any objections to what's in there, so it doesn't really matter. It just seemed like that should be its own item, but I'm willing to go with that. So sorry.
You wanted to pull the second reading out of the consent agenda?
Right, just as a matter of policy. I mean, as having a second reading, unless nobody else has an objection to it or wants to discuss that.
Councilmember Wilcoxon, if on first reading it passes unanimously, then it's put on the consent agenda. That's that.
Okay, thank you.
Ordinances.
All right.
Okay. All right, with nothing, it's been moved, and did we get a second for that to approve?
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and second that we approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. I believe that's the majority, so the agenda is approved. All right, we can move on. Clerk Kalinga, please.
The next item on the agenda is presentations, and there are 2 proclamations under this. The first one is a proclamation for Breast Cancer Awareness Month.
Would you read that, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Whereas while considerable progress has been made in the fight against breast cancer, it remains the most common newly diagnosed cancer and the second leading cause of cancer deaths among Michigan women. And whereas in 2018, 14.9% of deaths from cancer among Michigan women were due to breast cancer, according to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And whereas in Michigan, more than 8,800 new cases of breast cancer will be diagnosed in 2020, and more than 1,380 people will die of the disease. And whereas certain factors put some women at higher risk than others, including age, personal or family history of breast cancer, specific genetic mutations, dense breast tissue, starting menstruation at a young age, never giving birth or having first pregnancy after age 30. And whereas breast cancer is the most common cancer diagnosed and the leading cause of cancer death in Hispanic Latino women. And whereas through research and advocacy, advances have been made in the fight against breast cancer, including an increased rate of early detection and a 98% 5-year survival rate for localized breast cancer. And whereas October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, an annual campaign to increase awareness about this disease and to raise funds for research into its cause, prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and ultimately finding a cure. And whereas during this month, we should reaffirm our commitment to supporting breast cancer research and to educating all citizens about its risk factors, detection, and treatment, as well as the importance of regular screenings as early detection increases the effectiveness of available treatments. And whereas as we display pink ribbons and wear pink clothing to raise awareness, we also recognize more than 3.8 million breast cancer survivors, those currently battling disease, and their family and friends who are a tireless source of love and encouragement. We recommend the efforts of our medical professionals and researchers working to find a cure for this deadly disease, and we honor the lives who lost to breast cancer. Now, therefore, I, Allen Richardson, Mayor of the City of Ypsilanti, hereby proclaim October 2020 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Ypsilanti.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. The next proclamation. Good evening, City Manager McClellan. McMullen, do you wanting to read your own proclamation, or would you like the clerk to read it? You're muted. We can't hear you.
I'm not muted. Something's wrong.
Oh, I thought you were saying something, but I didn't hear you.
Yeah. Let me go into my chat.
Good evening, City Manager. How are you?
Good. I don't think I have audio.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me?
I can
Yeah.
hear you now. At
Oh,
first,
okay.
It's
I
cutting
was-
in and out.
No,
Okay.
at first I couldn't hear you, but now I do.
Okay, something might be wrong over here. The clerk can read it.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's see here. Okay, whereas domestic violence perpetrators intentionally use a pattern of physical, emotional, sexual, psychological, and or economic coercion and abuse to control their intimate partners, violating their dignity, security, and psychological as well as physical well-being. And whereas domestic violence perpetrators cause significant and long-lasting trauma to countless women and men of every religion, culture, as well as economic and social status. And whereas when children are involved, domestic violence perpetrators' choices to be violent and abusive are parenting choices that often have a devastating and far-reaching adverse impact on the safety and well-being of children and their non-offending parents. And whereas the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reports that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner contact sexual violence, and or intimate partner stalking with impacts such as injury, fearfulness, post-traumatic stress disorder, use of victim services, contraction of sexually transmitted diseases, etc. And whereas Michigan is committed to holding domestic violence perpetrators accountable, employing interventions in order to reduce the risk and harm to all victims, as well as providing victims the resources and support they deserve to enhance their safety and well-being. And whereas Domestic Violence Awareness Month provides an important opportunity to learn more about domestic violence and to demonstrate support for the numerous organizations and individuals who provide advocacy efforts, services, and assistance to victims. And now, therefore, I, Francis McMullen, City Manager of the City of Ypsilanti, hereby proclaim October 2020 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the City of Ypsilanti.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on either one of those proclamations? Anyone have anything to add or to say?
I just think those are very timely. I appreciate having family members and friends who are affected by both of those major things that impact people's life. I'm glad that we're recognizing those breast cancer and domestic violence as things that we're trying to get rid of as a city and as a world. So thank you for those proclamations.
Thank you. Anyone else with any comments? Okay, seeing none. Clerk Kalinga.
Mayor and Council, the next item on the agenda is public comments. Switch to the attendees list. The first individual with their hand up was Collins, and I will allow them to speak now. I'll start the timer for 3 minutes, and then when it expires, I'll raise my hand to indicate that the time has expired. Oops. Oops. I apologize. It was Catherine Delaga was the first. I apologize.
Oh, Catherine Delaga. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Timer started.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thanks. Speaking tonight about the resolution and ordinance revision. related to the Sustainability Commission report. I'm a Ward 2 resident, and it looks like at this point, maybe it's a matter of no good deed going unpunished. Because I've gotten the impression quickly by looking at some documents and talking with Council Member Wilcoxon that looks like there was an interest in revising the ordinances to permit and encourage more sustainable pollinator-friendly gardens in the city. And where it looks right now is that maybe there was kind of a rebound from being something that was very permissive to something that's now less permissive than the original existing ordinance. So I would encourage some further discussion rather than approval right now. I do understand and support the need for having the ability within the city to regulate what seems to be a real problem with untended gardens and overgrowth. And I also recognize the importance of having safety precautions for cars and pedestrians and bicyclists, etc. But I don't know that it's helpful really in the long run to be over strict in terms of the border zones that are mandated in this current proposal, as well as the prohibition on having any of these gardens in the easement. So I would encourage a little more of a carrot versus stick approach to take to resolve the issue overall. And thanks to Councilmember Wilcoxon for the information that he's provided.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, the next individual with their hand up is Lamar Weir, and I'll allow him to speak now.
Good evening. My name is Lamar Weir from Congresswoman Dingell's office. I'm just here to get any important updates and that's going to be going on in Ypsilant, and then also happy to hear about the 2 proclamations. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Lamar. Appreciate you coming.
All right, the next individual with their hand up is Kira Berman, and I'll allow her to speak now.
Hi there, Council. I live in Normal Park on Pearl Street, and I have a pollinator garden, and I'm here to talk about that ordinance. I also manage the pollinator garden for the University of Michigan Museum of Natural History. And I think, like the previous speaker, I think that there are problems with the ordinance as it's written. Both the problems with the easement and the 3-foot setback, and the problem that it doesn't seem to be encouraging the planting of pollinator gardens. It seems to be really regulating them. And I think this council, especially at this time when we have really important issues, the struggle for Black lives, voting rights, COVID-19, and immigration issues, which are, I think, riveting our country. I think over-regulating people's flower gardens. And the ordinance is written right now in a way that would forbid me from planting purple coneflowers in the easement. Most of you know what those look like, or black-eyed Susans. Those are both native plants as defined. It would also forbid, because it references the MCL code 247.61, and the ones that follow that, would forbid anyone from planting Queen Anne's lace, which is not an aggressive weed, but is a food source for swallowtail butterflies. So I really encourage you to consider further the details of this ordinance before you pass it. I've been working with pollinator plants for a long time, and you guys can do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next individual with their hand up is Keith McCloskey. I'll allow them to speak now. You have to unmute yourself, Keith.
Let's try that again. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to comment on the revision of the weed ordinance. First and foremost, I'm concerned that there is no reference to native and/or pollinator-friendly plants, and referring to them as noxious weeds seems awfully discouraging. And I feel like our city is more focused on encouraging things like pollinators and bee gardens and whatnot. So I would encourage you to consider writing a separate section for this instead of trying to shoehorn it into the one that already exists. As for specific concerns about what you guys have, in section 11081, section A, it states 10 inches, but then in section B, it states 12 inches. And it's really not clear to me that there's a difference between those two sections. I'd appreciate some input on that later on if possible. Otherwise, trying to narrow down this by height seems unreasonable. For instance, are you going to make somebody cut down their sunflowers? Those are clearly going to exceed the 12-inch mark. This in turn, like milkweed. Milkweed's going to grow taller too, but I think all of us know that they are a home for the monarch butterflies. While I appreciate the work staff has done to draft these updates, they fall considerably short of the recommendations by the Sustainability Commission, not to mention the complete absence of communication from staff to the Sustainability Commission about the drastic changes to the resolution. With that said, I'd also like to comment regarding commission appointments, specifically requesting council make every effort to fill the long vacant Sustainability Commission seat. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
Okay, the next individual with their hand up is What's Left Ipsy, and I'll allow them to speak now.
Hi, Council. This is Amber. I didn't realize my name was still in the newspaper. Amber Fellows, and nice to see you all. I'm here just to support the Ordinance 1368, which are the changes to the non-discrimination ordinance, just to make sure that the new additions to the ordinance are reflected throughout the ordinance pertaining to source of income as far as housing vouchers go, student loans. And I know there's another adjustment in the resolutions for, I think it's a misdemeanor, adding misdemeanor into a protected source or protected class as well. So I support those changes. I do think it will make the ordinance more effective as a tool to actually use to, prevent discrimination and address it when it's happening. So, and we do know that these things are happening in the city presently, and I know that the NDO hasn't been used yet, so this would be a good test to see it actually be useful and see what happens when it becomes useful. And then the other thing is, at the end of the agenda, I see that the mayor wants to schedule for the housing affordability work session, the joint session between council and the housing committee and defend affordability. I'm excited about that. I just ask that the mayor open it up so that folks from the housing committee and they are able to just verify that the date that you are all discussing works for the schedules of those people, just so we can actually attend that meeting. So that's all. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Amber.
The next individual with their hand up is Collins. I'll allow them to speak now.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. My name is TC Collins. I represent a large portion of Washtenaw County. I have the largest African American garden program in Washtenaw County with over 3,800 kids. I also have a garden spot at Chapel Business Center and also growing a mushroom farm. It is very important that we look at the native plants. For an example, the milkweed plant is very productive, but yet it is also could be an eyesore for some in the community. It is an invasive plant, but also it is a very important plant for the community for the monarch butterfly. A native plant is one that occurs naturally and particular grown in a region that is in its ecosystem or its natural habitat. We also can also look at the creeping Virginia. That is also a plant that is an invasive plant, but also is an eyepiece. We also can look at poison ivy. That is a invasive plant, but also to one person, it could be a lovely plant. The concerns that I do have that when I teach gardening and farming and try to teach younger children at the age of 2 and beyond, to cherish the plants that we have around us in our ecosystem. It's very important that we try and hold on to the native plants that we do have around us, because there are some herbalists that still use these plants, and there are also other people that use them as in medicinal purposes also. It is very important that we kindly consider looking at and addressing this with a light hand and not a strong hand, because it's very beneficial, because there are a lot of people in the community that are from the older generations that do cherish a lot of these older plants, but yet the younger generation, they may not know about these plants, and I'm here to help educate them. I may not be a perfect person for this, but I like to extend this knowledge to help the younger generation to carry this trait. I have learned this trait from my 2 great-grandfathers and my 2 great-grandmothers. I was born and raised on the south side of Ypsilant. A lot of the plants on the south side are invasive, but also are very productive and used wisely if grown correctly. Please, if the council can look at this and just educate, or if you need other people to help educate other people, even with the enforcement officer, I'd be kindly to use my services to help the city to address this as best we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
The next individual with their hand up is Kate, and I'll allow them to speak now.
Good evening, Council. I'm very glad that that Commissioner Michalowski and Commissioner Collins are here tonight. I'm concerned about the process that produced this amendment. What happened to the resolution from the Sustainability Commission? Why was no one from that commission part of their discussion of their own resolution? I listened to that discussion, and what I heard about was all the reasons staff didn't like it. No one spoke on the reason for the resolution, which is that pollinators are rapidly becoming extinct. We need pollinators for the vast majority of our food crops. Have you thought about what is happening in the parts of the country that produce most of our food? Fires on the West Coast, heat waves and drought alternating with flooding in the Great Plains, floods and hurricanes in Florida, the Gulf Coast, and the Southeast. People will be moving to Michigan. We will have to grow more food here for more people. We will have to make up for the increasing destruction of farmland in other parts of the country. We have a responsibility to preserve our land. Why didn't Council send the resolution back to the Sustainability Commission and ask them to address issues of concern? Why has this resolution simply vanished? Have you talked to anyone on the commission and asked them your questions? And why is there so much concern about how our yards look? Do you want to encourage people to scrutinize and judge and anonymously report on their neighbors? That is what is currently the system. The current system is selective enforcement. If you pass this amendment, the enforcement officers will certainly rely even more on selective enforcement, because more than 1,000 homes will be in violation of this code, unless you plan to hire an army of enforcement officers. Maintaining a lawn takes physical ability, time, and equipment. If you lack one of these, if you're sick or working 2 jobs and raising a family, if you don't have money to hire someone or to repair a broken lawnmower, then you get a citation. Is that fair? Is that equitable? This amendment takes us in the wrong direction. Please work with the Sustainability Commission to come up with something much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
The next individual with their hand up is Laura Kopp, and I will allow them to speak now.
Hi there, my name is Laura Kopp and I'm a resident of Ward 2. I just wanted to thank the city staff and city council for your recent discussions on having a free and fair election that's going to be held quite a bit on mail-in voting. For the resolution tonight, 2020-214, in case there was any controversy, I would like to voice my support for making city offices appointment only, except for the city clerk's office, in order to support mail-in voting. And I hope these discussions continue in the coming weeks, and maybe even after the election, to see what we can learn from this election about how to have better elections and better support staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next individual with their hand up is Mark Higby, and I'll allow them to talk now.
Hello, members of council. First, I want to thank you all for and members of the city staff. I want to thank you all for the service that you provide for people in Ypsilanti. And observing city politics for 20 years, infrequently have I heard of city council members being thanked, but it's hard work. I appreciate that, and thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So my main concern is about the weed ordinance. I don't understand what happened to the Sustainability Commission's draft. I do understand from years of occasional conversations with the city code enforcement officers that they are arbitrary quite often. And their director is too. Twice, 2 years in a row, they have refused to specify what in my yard is allegedly in violation of the code. Refused. Now, that's arbitrary law enforcement. If it's a law, you ought to be able to state what's in violation or what isn't. But they refuse to do that. One inspector told me one year that milkweed was in violation. His colleague told me that the same thing the next year. Now, milkweed is a species that without it, there are no monarch butterflies. Many people in Ypsilanti are devoted to caring for the survival of that species, the monarch butterfly. But the city code enforcement officer thought I had to get rid of the milkweed. That is arbitrary. That is not the way to enforce law. Neither is the way to enforce law according to what your neighbor thinks. Many people think my yard is beautiful. We think it's beautiful. But it's arbitrary to try and to write a code about code and aesthetic judgments. I thank you all. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Mark.
The next individual with their hand up is Interfaith Counsel for Peace and Justice. I'll allow them to speak now.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, this is Desiree Simmons. I live in Ward 3. Have a couple of things just to talk about. One is to this conversation about the Noxious weed ordinance. one of the things that I've been seeing and hearing, I mean, from today and also just leading up to today, is a lot of people are questioning, rightfully so, kind of what would be the role of commissions? Like, what are the roles of commissions if a commission is working on ordinance that kind of gets sidestepped with something else that really isn't really in the same spirit even of the ordinance put forward? Also recognizing that the Sustainability Commission is just putting forward a big sustainability plan, and how this actually goes really against even what's in that plan when I'm looking at a whole section on biodiversity, native plants, as well as wildlife friendly gardens. And so I think that we need to be thinking about how are the things that we're putting in place actually part of our long-term planning, and are we actually moving forward, because this also seems to be kind of moving backwards from where we need to be moving as we think about climate justice and the crisis in front of us. And I think putting barriers in people's ways is going to make it less likely that we're going to be able to change individual behaviors, much less systemic ones that are necessary for us to turn the tide of what we are facing, and recognizing the interconnectedness of all these different kinds of changes. And so I think that's something to keep in mind. I definitely was one of those folks. I had somebody, I have a wildlife garden, and because we want to slowly get rid of a lot of our lawn, but haven't had time to necessarily do all of that. But had somebody who posted something on my door as if they were actually a city official, and they were not. But they posted something up, including like second notices about my wildlife garden. And in fact, one of the reasons that they were claiming that my garden was in violation, people in my neighborhood actually who do use wheelchairs actually said that they never found the flowers to be in their right of way. And so this is the kind of thing that happens, and then it makes me feel like, my neighbors are looking, and what kind of community is that putting forward. I also just want to speak in support of the work session around housing, and also wanting to make sure that it will be scheduled so that folks can make sure to be there. Definitely.
Excuse me, Desiree. The clerk has his hand up, meaning your 3 minutes are up. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, it doesn't look like at this time anyone else has their hand up in the attendees list. I feel like we can wait a couple moments to see if anyone else raises their hand. Okay, if it's okay with council, we can move on to the ordinances first reading.
Okay, before you do that, I would just like to thank all those for the public comment that came out and spoke. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
The first ordinance on the agenda is Ordinance 1367, an ordinance to amend the Noxious Weed Ordinance, Article 4, Weed Control, Section 110-80 at Sec of the Ypsilanti City Code. It is resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the ordinance entitled an ordinance to amend the Noxious Weed Ordinance, Article 4, Weed Control, Section 110-80 at Sequitur of the Ypsilanti City Code be adopted on first reading.
So motion.
Or
Okay, it's been moved by Councilperson Morgan, and is that Mayor Pro Tem or
yes,
Councilperson Somerville?
that was Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Okay, thank you. All right, did we have is there a staff person to present on this?
I think it might be between Mr. Barr and myself, but I'll start if that's all right. So, in working with the council members who requested us draft this ordinance and working with staff, we put together kind of what we thought was kind of a meet in the middle approach where we want to make sure that our vacant landlords are maintaining their properties. We also want to give people who want to have natural pollinator gardens a chance to actually have them. We decided in looking at all of the various aspects of it to go with a registration form where if you have a natural pollinator garden, you apply for a quote unquote permit that is free. And then the code enforcement officer can actually review what is in your yard and to make sure there's no noxious weeds and to make sure it's relatively maintained. And so that's the big change. We also upped the weed requirement from 10 inches to 12 inches. Staff's biggest concern is, like I said, the people who own homes that do not maintain them whatsoever. By eliminating the weed height ordinance that'll allow for additional rodents to get into the properties, as well as noxious weeds to spread quickly. So that is why we took what the Sustainability Commission did, worked through it with some council members and our legal counsel. Mr. Barr might have to be the one to explain the 3 feet in front of the house or that area that was put in by him, so I can't really speak to that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Barr.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
The ordinance before you was a combination between the council members, the staff. It came to my office. We looked at different ordinances around the state and picked up what we thought was appropriate from those ordinances and with the state Sustainability Commission had requested. And the idea was that historically, the city of Ypsilant has not allowed tall grass and vegetation in the neighborhoods. And that obviously is changing. The public has decided in a different direction. But we still have the questions of the public health, welfare, and safety. And so this ordinance was a combination, an attempt to merge all of those things into one ordinance. The 3-foot setback was set up in order that people not have these weeds or these pollinating plants or these other types of plants right up to the property line so they don't intrude in the neighbor's lot. Originally, we had thought it would be best to contain these gardens into the rear lots, but decided that that would not work for everyone, and so that was taken out. There was also another proposal to have a 25-foot setback in the front yards, which is common in zoning ordinances and so on, but that was changed to 3 feet. And the difference between the 10 inches and the 12 inches in the ordinance is just an oversight. The original ordinance was, I believe, 10 inches, and then there was a movement to increase that to 12 inches. So the idea is that this would at least be a beginning where people could have these gardens, and some people find that they're beautiful and some people find that they're not. But this would give the city an idea of where they are so that the court enforcement officer would know what the idea was and that this was not an absentee person just not taking care of their property.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Myers, do you have anything before we open the
No, I do not.
hearing? No?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Clerk Kalinga, would you open the public hearing, please?
Council, no one currently has their hand up to address anyone. Collins has her hand up. I'll allow them to speak now.
Thank you again. it's important that we do look at this, but with a gentle hand. Now, I understand that if you have a blight piece of property and weeds are growing abusively, that's understandable. But again, for an example, and I'm not trying to offend anyone, but if the city has invasive plants on their property, are they going to be mandated by the same process as a resident? And at the same time, we would like to have transparency because, like I discussed earlier, that invasive plants to one person could be weeds, but to another person, it could be their food source. So I'm just very concerned with this, going forward with this, because I teach gardening and farming. I also teach about foraging of the Underground Railroad, and my key component of the Underground Railroad are many invasive plants in people's neighborhoods, such as the dandelion, the plantain, the goldenrod. Those are very important for my class projects. And if I'm teaching and handing out seeds, I myself might be in violation, and I don't want to do that. And I think that hurts my operation of teaching. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next individual with their hand up is Catherine Delaga.
Delaga, thanks. Yeah, so it's really interesting to hear the rest of the background, but I would say that it sounds like there are people who are truly very far apart on this issue. So it concerns me that we have representatives from the Sustainability Commission raising serious concerns about the direction this has gone, that the effort that was made early on by council members and what is present now does not appear to me to be a middle ground between these things. It's really kind of far out of the orbit, since some of these stipulations are introduced anew rather than being part of a previous discussion and not part of the existing ordinance either. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next individual with their hand up is Kate. I'll allow her to speak now.
I don't understand why the code has to lump landlords in with everybody else. Staff often brings up the need for making sure that landlords don't neglect their property or lots that are abandoned or where someone has passed away and there's no owner, why that's not maintained. And I think it could be specified in the ordinance where landlords have all kinds of rules and regulations that they have to follow that homeowners don't have to follow. And I don't understand why everybody gets lumped in together. Why people who are homeowners who want their yards in a certain way are being lumped in with neglectful landlords and vacant properties. It just seems, it doesn't make any sense to me.
The next individual with their hand up is Interfaith Counsel for Peace and Justice. I'll allow them to speak now.
Hello, thank you again. This is Desiree Simmons. I just wanted to speak to this idea of the 3 feet around the property line. I think one thing to note is that, for one, a lot of folks use plants as part of a border, as part of a way to create borders with their neighbors, or to be able to create some privacy within their own space. I also wonder about whether the city really wants to be in a position where they're privileging one person and their decision for what they do with their property over another, which is what it sounds like to me when saying that the 3 feet is to make sure that it doesn't go into another person's yard or get onto their property. where really that should be a conversation between neighbors, as opposed to the city trying to delegate which kind of keeping of lawn is acceptable and or should be considered standard and or should be considered desirable. Those are not conversations that I think the city should be involved with around that. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next individual with their hand up is Mark Higby. I'll allow him to speak now.
Thank you. A quick comment on the height of plants that are permitted under this new resolution. 12 inches, 10 inches, they're both arbitrary. Plants do not respect ordinances. If milkweed is okay and it grows to 3 feet, then that's okay. It varies time of year. If you inspect them in April, it will be a different height than in September. And this is vital if you have any sense of how the ecology works. The Sustainability Commission appointed by Council did a lot of hard work at coming up with a sensible proposal, which seems to have been run through a paper shredder and pasted back together arbitrarily and presented to Council. I don't understand why that was done. Nothing comes of it. That's not a compromise. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next individual with their hand up is Keith McCloskey. Allow him to speak now.
Okay, thank you. Two quick statements. My question is why more policy needs to be added to expand inspectors when, if there's concern about a person's lawn, the inspector could simply ask or leave a message, and then they could say, well, this is in fact my pollinator garden. My other statement is I heard the explanation of who got together to discuss this, and I was curious again why the Sustainability Commission was not invited to this discussion, and further why when I did express concerns over email, that those concerns ceased to be responded to, both of which are concerning. So it would be good to find out how to move this process together better so that we can all work together in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next individual with their hand up is what's left Ipsy. I'll allow them to speak now.
Hello, it's Amber, fellows. So I am an outsider on this issue. I have not been tracking or following it, and I just think maybe I want to share as an outsider on the issue that it seems a resounding, clear consensus from what I'm hearing from the public that they're not comfortable with the ordinance. So I just recommend that you go back to the drawing table before making a decision on it tonight, because it just doesn't seem like people are vibing with it. As an outsider, it seems clear to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that is the last individual with their hand up that has not already spoken. Give it a few more minutes to see if anybody would like to, or a few more moments to see if anybody else would like to speak. And I'll also inform those in the attendance that if you have already spoken, you're not permitted to speak a second time. Seeing none, if council would like to read the resolution to close the public hearing.
Please do.
It is resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the ordinance entitled An Ordinance to Amend the Noxious Weed Ordinance, Article 4, Weed Control, Section 11080 at SEC of the Ypsilanti City Code be adopted on first reading. Oh, I'm sorry, I read the wrong one. Hearing for an ordinance entitled An Ordinance to Amend the Noxious Weed Ordinance, Article 4, Weed Control, Section 11080 at SEC of the Ypsilanti City Code be officially closed.
So moved.
It's been moved and supported.
Yeah.
Is this a roll call vote?
You can do a
or
roll call on this.
voice vote?
Yeah, you can do a voice vote. That's fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I actually want to move
Aye.
to table this.
Okay.
Okay, did you
Good.
get the
Well,
count?
you have to call for nays.
Yes. Are there anyone opposed closing the public hearing?
But with all
Okay.
in favor, the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Somerville.
Yeah, I wanted to move to table this. Just table it for the time being.
Is there a specific time you want to bring it back up? I'll support it.
No, just table it for now.
If per Robert's rules, if it's tabled, it has to come up at the next meeting, or it dies.
Yeah, I don't think what we have presented tonight, I have no interest in bringing it back.
Okay, well, but if it's tabled, you might want to, I believe, Mr. Barr, would she want to postpone it rather than table? Because if you table, it has to come up back at the next meeting.
It doesn't.
If it's okay, I would suggest the motion be to postpone definitely, and then it can be brought back when decided.
All right, thank you. So do you want to change your motion, Councilmember Somerville?
I'm sorry, I don't know if it was my internet connection, but Mr. Barr kind of fizzled out from my end.
Okay, he said that. You want to repeat it, Mr. Barr?
Yes, I'd recommend, in this case, a motion to postpone indefinitely.
Okay, I move to postpone this item indefinitely.
Is there support for that motion?
Come on, Morgan, you're going to do that.
We're
Yeah.
ready like 10 seconds ago.
Yeah. But I wanted to come back. If we don't, it's going to stay
I
the
mean,
way it is.
so I don't know if, I don't think what is on our agenda right now is something I'm interested in moving forward with. So that's why I'm saying I would like to table this.
But if you table it, it's got to come back the next meeting.
Not if it's indefinitely.
That's why I said indefinitely.
Okay, but the
My
right
understanding-
was to be postponed. Okay, Councilmember Brian Jones-Chance, please.
Yeah, I think we maybe ought to discuss it because from what I'm hearing and what's written, there are some misunderstandings as to what is actually on the agenda and what this means. And it seems like that's not clearly understood, and I think we owe it to the public to at least explain what is actually in this agenda.
All right, thank you. Okay. Councilmember Wilcoxon.
I agree that having an open discussion about this, if it gets tabled eventually, I don't want to get it tabled without a discussion. If it gets tabled later, that's fine, but I think there are so many misunderstandings from the people in public comment. I posted about this today and lots of people had questions, and even though I explained it in that post, people still didn't understand it. Maybe that's on me, but I think there has been so much misinformation in social media running up to this that people have a very they just misunderstand what is actually going on here, and I would like to have that conversation tonight. And if we table this at the end of that conversation, I'm okay with that. But I think we really need to clear up that misunderstanding, because certain people in the community have provided a narrative that isn't accurate. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify.
Councilmember Somerville, I didn't see a second to your motion, but.
Yeah, so I guess since everybody commented on it, I just wanted to clarify. I don't think that we can all have a conversation about this. Other folks that have already given public comment are not going to be able to have an open conversation with us. So it just seems, if you all want to do it, it just doesn't really seem fair. I I think maybe we should try having a joint conversation with the Sustainability Commission at this point, because members showed up and expressed their dissatisfaction. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with what has been brought forward by staff, but I think that, like, given what we've already heard, I don't necessarily think it's fair for us to have the conversation just among council without being able to have an open conversation with the folks on the Sustainability Commission. But I understand that nobody wants to second my motion, so that's all.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion?
On that
Any other-
particular topic, on the tabling?
No, well, on discussion, on the motion died for lack of second.
Yeah.
So this is discussion on the ordinance.
Right.
Councilmember Morgan.
Just a question as a point of reference. You know those little libraries that we have around the city, those little mini libraries that people put in their yards and their, are those tracked by the city at all? Like, do the city know how many little personal libraries we have around here?
That
No,
would
we
be a
do.
question.
No, we don't.
Okay, I'm saying that because I see them everywhere. And when we're thinking about gardens, however they're defined as pollinated gardens, bee gardens, butterfly gardens, there has to be some way to determine the content of a pollinated garden. Horticulturalists, people who say whether they're invasive species or native plants, there has to be something to identify what a pollinated garden looks like. And for someone who's coming around to enforce, there has to be, when it comes to identifying what they look like, those people have to be up to code, and then enforceability, as opposed to one of the people who called in and said how arbitrary it was. So in my opinion, if we have kind of null and void, but if we had libraries around and we knew the stipulations and the standards of libraries, and we knew how to log them, and we knew there was 27 in the city, we could track them and then interface with them, just like these pollinators. If people have identified pollinated gardens, they should be logged and tracked. So if they're all throughout the city, we have 272, the enforcement code won't have to walk all up and down the block. They know exactly where these people who identify these gardens are and what's the content of them and how to identify them. So if it's 10 inches or 12 inches, a lot of that is, like you say, depending on the time they grow. I don't know about it personally, but it should be a checklist on what people's looking for when they're coming to enforce our ordinances about noxious weeds. That's my 2 cents.
Councilmember Morgan, this ordinance would actually allow for us to have a mechanism to track the pollinator gardens. There would be an application where if you wanted to not be subject to the grass and weed ordinance, you could apply for an exemption. And then we would be able to track them and know what they are putting into their gardens and make sure that there's no invasive species that are going in there that are going to be spread. So that was the intent of this ordinance.
When you say exempt, that means they have an option to opt out of being tracked.
Yes, if you could get an exemption. Councilmember Wilcox, and I see your head. You could get an exemption for a pollinator garden if you get the permit. So you couldn't opt out, but you would have to get the permit.
Okay.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, Councilmember Wilcoxon.
So I think the question from Mr. Morgan is would they be tracked? Yes, they would be tracked, but the tracking would make them exempt from the weed ordinance.
Yes.
So
okay, that's a little okay. So you have to get the permit in order to be able to opt out from tracking.
Well, sorry.
No, that's okay. If you want to answer, go ahead.
For clarity's sake, you can please.
So I just want to clarify the process with the mayor. You've stated in other emails and things like that you would call on people and give them that chance, and I don't want to butt into that. So I'd like to reserve my comments for later because I spent a lot of time in all the bodies that have considered this, and I would like to have other people have their say before I comment on it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments? Councilmember Chance.
Yes, so I recommended that this ordinance be changed. And so I do want to address some of the misunderstandings. And to anyone who emailed, I did not get some of those, I guess. But to anyone who did, I responded right away, as I think Ms. Levin can attest. The first thing this intends to do is to eliminate arbitrary and subjective code enforcement. I think one of the reasons probably that the Sustainability Commission was not very much involved or involved at all in this process is because in many sections we took verbatim the suggestions that they made, and you can find those in the agenda from September 1st on page 86. Also, there was mention of Queen Anne's lace and other noxious weeds and invasive species. Those species were specifically listed in the recommendation from the Sustainability Commission. And I don't think anyone here would have a problem with, and the list is fairly short, so I don't think anyone here would have a problem with using that list specifically. There also seems to be some confusion surrounding the height limitations. The height increase from 10 inches to 12 inches is for non-exempt lawns, which means that for someone who is not permitted, they can grow their grass or weeds or whatever, an additional 2 inches if they were going to take their, their lawn care to the limit of what the city allows. And that's another 20% of biomass, just accidentally for even folks who are not registered. That's for soil health and all other kinds of reasons. I think that's a good thing. The Sustainability Commission recommended no height limitation, but this is just for weeds. The exemption would allow anyone with a free permit to grow allowed species essentially as tall as they wanted to. So I think there's some confusion there, and maybe there was something in the wording, but when I look at what's proposed, it clearly says exempt. It clearly says exception and describes what that is. The 3-foot setback, I don't know about everyone else, but I would be very comfortable just changing that to having some language, barring you from encroaching onto another property, and I think that's fine. I personally am not a fan of monoculture or grass in general, so I thought this was a good move, and it followed the Sustainability Commission's recommendations, I think, more closely than some folks realized. And maybe that's because they can't see the redlined version that we got. And again, that's on the September 1st agenda. What this does, in my view, is it legitimizes folks who want to grow native gardens, pollinator gardens, or have wild yards. And I'm afraid that if we don't move forward, then we won't move anywhere. And some of the ecological benefits that we could see from even this change will not be realized. And the folks who would be exempted and allowed to grow their yards as they see fit will now go back to not being able to. And so I don't know if the public, from what I hear, would really want to go back to or remain at what we have now, or even take that risk.
All right, thank you. Council members Somerville, I see your hand, but let me check with Mayor Pro Tem and Council Member Simmons to see if they have comments.
No, I had my hand raised earlier, but actually Council Member Wilcoxon made a statement that I was thinking, so I'm all good for right now.
All right, thank you. Council Member Simmons.
Yeah, I think I'm in line with a lot of things that Steve, saying, and Council Member Jones Chance, so yeah, nothing else for me to add to that.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Somerville.
Yeah, I just kind of want to, I obviously respect all the time that other members of council and staff have put into this. I've been working on this with residents for a year at this point as well, outside of what the Sustainability Commission has done. I've taken time out to listen to people. And I think that one of the main points that's missing is that there was no effort to include the Sustainability Commission. I actually do think that these amendments to our current ordinance are good, and I do think that they represent progress. I mean, I have been saying that we should have some mechanism to register yards. That way our enforcement officers don't have to struggle so much to recognize what certain things are. I think that maybe because the first time people saw the notion of that was you have to get this permit, and even though it's free, that's still a little alarming for people when they weren't doing that before. So I actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with the adjustments that are being proposed. I think that they're a good idea, but I think what's missing is that this came out, which people have been asking for a long time to see, the resolution that was passed by the Sustainability Commission, and that took a long time. And then COVID happened and it delayed it more. And then what they got is something from the outside perspective is completely different. And I think that even though staff did interpret what that sustainability resolution, and they, included that in these considerations for the amendment to our current ordinance, I think that's all fine and good. I just think that we need to go back and work better with the Sustainability Commission before we even vote on something. They need to feel like they were involved in the process, even if it's not the resolution that they proposed. Because someone brought that up during, public comment, what is the point of a commission if we're just not even gonna hear them out? And I don't necessarily think that we always have to take verbatim what's passed in a board or commission, but there needs to be a serious effort made between the two parties to work together and compromise on stuff. So, I don't want to vote this down because I do think it's a step forward, but at the same time, I do feel like folks feel dismissed and unheard at the moment. And speaking from someone who started talking to folks about this over a year ago, it is a little, it bums me out because people feel like this isn't what they expected, even though I think it is a good path forward. We have a lot of commissioners that dedicate a lot of hours into the Sustainability Commission, and we've been working on updating our master plan. So I don't know. I just don't think this is aligned well right now.
So would you like to turn that into a motion that there be a coming together of some council members and representatives from the Sustainability Commission?
Sorry.
I didn't hear you. No, I was asking you if you would like to turn that into a motion.
Well, not at the time. At this time, I think Steve and Anthony both had something.
Okay. All right. Steve, Councilmember Wilcox. I'm sorry.
Do I have a time limit on it? I want to start by thanking the Sustainability Commission for all the time they put in. Both Keith and Katie Grunwald did a lion's share of the legwork Katie did in meeting with her colleagues at the EMU, biologists and ecologists. And she met with Kate Levin, and it came up with the list that was congruent with the state of Michigan's noxious weed list. So I just wanted to thank them for that. I want to thank Joe for the conversations that he and I had in terms of looking at the proposed the resolution from the Sustainability Commission and talk about enforceability, and that was a very productive conversation as well. Having said that, I think this proposal looks very different, and I have issues with some of the briefings ahead of the proposal, but really we've taken this on because one person has continually been cited for this. And it wasn't on anybody's radar before this because nobody else was getting cited. And that person came and lobbied the city council several times. He came and lobbied Sustainability Commission, and Sustainability Commission took that up. And I reported back to the council on what they were doing. Having said that, you know, there are, you know, the height, you know, this is here for as a tool to deal with absentee landlords. And I've said this before, and this is like, we need that as a city. We need a tool to enforce, you know, people to take care of their property, because that is, has been an issue in the past, and it's a concern for a lot of people. And so the whole idea that people are passing judgment is like, we pass judgment every single day. And that's a common thing to human existence. And Mr. Barr has addressed this in the past. So those judgments happen. But the question is, what are we trying to achieve with this? And the ordinance, as it's written right now, not talking about the amendment, is about health issues, public health issues, you know, vermin and trash and, you know, unsavory characters hanging out in vacant lots and things like that. And we need a tool to deal with that. And so there is an ordinance on the books already. In another place in our code of ordinances, there is an exemption for gardens that has been there the whole time. So if you have a garden and you have a garden in the front of your house, it doesn't stipulate where it has to be. It just says if you have a garden, and if people recognize this as a garden, then you're exempt from this height requirement. And so people have been, you know, writing all over social media about, well, what about my black-eyed Susans? What about my daisies? You know, what about my daylilies? You know, it's like, that's a garden. That's exempt from this ordinance. It's stated in another part of our code. So it's really not at issue. What's at issue is a particular citizen's continually has a complaint against them by somebody who passes their house. And so it's not a matter of the city being anti-pollinator, because lots of people have pollinator gardens in their front yard that don't get cited. So that is not the case. The case, you know, the city is not anti-pollinator, as some people have claimed. It's simply that somebody continually complains about this yard. And it's an aesthetic thing. And people have brought that up in the public comments. It's like, can we legislate aesthetics? And it's like, well, you know, that's up to us to figure that out. But this is a tool that we've been using for a while to hold landlords accountable. And this person has been ensnared in this. And this person has been given many ways to be compliant and has actually taken steps to be compliant with that. So it seems kind of like a moot point. There's been an out all along and a way to comply with this so that they're exempted already. So, you know, Joe's, you know, staff's inclusion of this permitting process was just a way to make that more obvious. And people clearly have take exception to the fact that they would have to permit their own yards. And, you know, with the line in there that there may be a fee assessed at another time. It's free now, but it may be assessed at another time. People are really upset about that. So, you know, I can understand that. But the fact is, there's always been an out for this. The current legislation, without any of the amendments, has allowed this person who has been cited an out from being cited. And so this whole exercise, we've gone through this, the sustainability is weighing in on it, spent a lot of time on it, city staff has spent a lot of time on it, you know, and it's gone through the process. Let's run it up the flagpole and see what comes back. You know, that is there. But the truth is, you know, and Bonnie has pointed this out to the Sustainability Commission and to me and to other people, that there has always been an exemption for people's gardens. And if you make it look like a garden and people understand it's a garden, you put a sign in your front yard and say, this is a pollinator garden, you're already exempt. So this conversation has run its course, and we haven't come up with a better situation that those people are happy with. And so I don't see a need to move anywhere further from what we already have, except for to maybe clean up the language in the portion of the code that says gardens are exempt, and then call it a night and move on. You know, if people want to, you know, have an extended conversation about this and bring sustainability back in, that's fine too. They did a lot of work, and the language in that proposal was very interesting. But I think in a lot of ways, as T.C. Collins, presented, that sets limits on species that aren't there now. So what do you want out of this? If the sustainability is more constrictive than what we have right now, and the amendment that we have before us from staff is more constrictive than what we had before, then why do anything and just sit with what we have? And any analysis of anything statistically, you always have to look at the null hypothesis that you do nothing. And at this point, that seems like the most reasonable thing. So I'll leave it at that.
You're muted. You're muted, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Morgan.
I just want to ask a question, and forgive me if it's ignorant. Is there a definable definition of what a garden is?
I believe that's a question for you, Mr. Myers.
Yes, there is. It's in the zoning ordinance. I can pull it up in a second.
Okay, because it shouldn't be too hard to interpret.
I have it up if you want.
Brian, if you have it up, it'd be easier than what I could do.
Yeah, so this is in chapter 122, section 529. It says gardens, community gardens. I'll just get down to the definition portion. Well, no. The goal of this standard is to clarify within existing districts that gardening is allowed as an accessory use and to allow for interim or long-term low-intensity gardens and or community gardens on vacant lots, et cetera, districts, as long as the use provides minimal impacts to residential character and minimal increase in traffic in and around related parcels. Furthermore, the city of Ypsilanti is an urban environment, and while these provisions are intended to support the local food system, it is not the intent of these standards to create agricultural districts within the city. Additionally, if any gardening or related use invokes the State Right to Farm Act, then this section and related sections in this chapter are to become null and void. And then it further defines them. All principal use gardens, community gardens in the relevant district here, R1, must maintain a 3-foot setback on street frontages as well as meet traffic visibility regulations detailed in section 122, subsection 675. Further, they should not encroach onto adjacent parcels or sites of or rights of way, I think it's meant to say.
Now, I don't want to interrupt you. So in my opinion, all that I heard, I still didn't hear, was that growing food? Was that for bee harvesting? What's the definition of a garden?
It simply
Does
refers to harvesting for some kind of use. It doesn't really
harvesting, that's very vague. Harvesting for some type of use.
I think it may be intentionally vague.
Okay, because again, I think we think about a rain boot garden. You can have any type of garden, by definition. So I just wanted to get a clear anything for harvesting. That's pretty broad, but okay, thank you.
I think what's relevant is probably section C that says that the property shall be maintained in an orderly and neat condition and should not be detrimental to the physical environment or to public health and general welfare, and remain subject to compliance with the property maintenance code, noise ordinance, and related ordinances, I'm assuming including the weed ordinance. So this gives folks an out. I don't know. I think folks are going to be hoist by their own petard here, and they're going to be shooting themselves in the foot.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Morgan. Is there any further discussion? Where's Councilmember Somerville? Did you have anything else, Councilmember Somerville?
No.
No. Councilmember Jones-Chance.
Yeah, I guess these are probably parting words for this ordinance change, but I think what could have been very beneficial to the folks who want to grow pollinator gardens and the folks who wanted a more natural yard with some minor tweaks, I think this could have been really good, and I think it still can be. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of appetite, and I'm afraid that the folks who would benefit from this are really the same folks who came out against it. And I think they've sort of shot themselves in the foot here. Unfortunately, this could have had some ecological benefits, some soil health benefits, water retention benefits in the landscape. And I just, It's really, I think it's unfortunate, but it doesn't look like there's a lot of appetite for this at the moment. And I also want to thank staff and Mr. Wilcoxon for working on this for as long as they have. And, you know, it's kind of a shame.
Okay. Well, hearing any other comments? Hearing no other comments, then I believe it's to, and no comments or no motions to delay it. Mr. Halanga, would you please call the roll? We're voting on the ordinance as it was, the amendment as was read.
Mayor Pro Tem
Councilmember
Brown.
Jones,
So
sorry. Councilmember
shot in the dark here, could I propose an amendment? I feel bad if I didn't try.
You can propose one.
Yes, I would like to strike the 3-foot rule.
Support.
Thank you.
It's been moved and supported to strike the 3-foot rule. Is there discussion on the amendment? Councilmember Simmons.
Well, the 3-foot rule, let me understand, because setbacks and whatnot can be really important in zoning. And so my biggest concern with not having that is how sometimes, you know, shrubs, vegetation, whatnot can obstruct people's vision, you know, whether it's kind of traffic, signage, and things of that nature. So maybe Joe could maybe help me understand, if we struck this out, the impact that would have. Would we still be okay from that standpoint? And even obstructing people's view when they're just kind of, you know, walking safely through neighborhoods and whatnot.
Yeah, so safety is our number one concern. But if it was deemed a garden as well, there would still be the 3-foot rule because that's in the zoning ordinance. So the 3-foot rule is in both places.
So kind of a moot point here.
Could I amend my amendment then to strike the 3-foot rule in favor of language that simply says they shall not encroach onto adjacent parcels or rights of way? I think that might address
Is there a second to that?
Well, Councilmember Somerville would have to agree to that friendly amendment.
Okay.
Yes, I
Councilmember
agree.
Somerville. Okay.
Yes.
You moved. It was really nice for a moment. I had all 6 council people right in front of me. So she's agreeing to that motion. Would you read that motion, please, Clerk Kalanga?
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but instead of strike the 3-foot rule, it changes that language to not encroach on property lines or rights of way.
yes.
Okay. It's been moved in second to not strike the 3-foot rule, but to include that it would not infringe.
Well, that is to replace the 3-foot rule with that.
Okay, I didn't hear him read it that way. Would you read it again, Clerk Kalanga?
Yes, as I previously stated, to replace the strike the 3-foot rule, replace that language with to not encroach on property lines or rights of way.
Okay, so to understand that for myself, that means that the 3-foot rule would still be in effect, correct?
Well, no, that language in this ordinance would be replaced by to not encroach on property lines or rights of way. However, I believe, as Joe stated, the zoning code includes the 3-foot rule for gardens.
Okay, so that's already there. Okay, fine. Okay, would you call the vote on the amendment, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Can you come back to me?
Councilmember Jones Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxon,
No.
Councilmember Simmons.
No.
Motion carries with 5 yes, 2 no.
All right, thank you. Now may we have are there any more amendments? Seeing none, would you call the roll on the ordinance, please?
Okay, the roll on Resolution 2020-203 as amended. Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxon,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
With 6 yes, 1 no. Carries.
All right, thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, Council, is Ordinance 1368. It is resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the ordinance entitled "An Ordinance to Amend Chapter 58 of the Ypsilanti Code to provide consistent language of the definition of prohibited discrimination and to remove Section 58-72 affirmative language be adopted on first reading."
Is there a motion and support?
Support. I so move. Sorry.
I'll support.
Councilmember
It's hard with
Somerville.
like not reading it.
So, and seconded by Councilmember Wilcoxon. Okay, is there a presentation?
Yes, Your Honor. This motion comes to council on my request. The background is when I was working on adding the misdemeanor class to the anti-discrimination ordinance, I noticed that the ordinance was inconsistent with all of the different classes that have been added over the years. So I went through and prepared language, including all of those classes, and then went through the ordinance and made sure that all of the classes were included the same way in each one of the sections, so that the ordinance is consistent. And then I noticed that the ordinance had a provision in it allowing something that the state has outlawed. That's the affirmative action provision. And so this ordinance would clean up that language to be consistent with the state law.
Okay. All right, thank you. Is there any discussion on the ordinance?
Thank you, Attorney Barr, for getting it all consistent for us.
Okay.
I have my hand. I don't know if you can see me, Lois, or Mayor.
Okay, I see you now. Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Somerville.
Yeah, so I had someone contact me because they noticed also the inconsistencies. And Mr. Barr was very quick to respond to me and clean that up. So hopefully, I hope folks will support this. It will make a huge difference in terms of the ability for folks to access housing in Ypsilanti if we actually do approve this and clean it all up, because source of income won't be a reason to discriminate. So I would really love for the support on this, and that is all.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or discussions? Councilmember Wilcoxon.
All right. I think this is great. I think this is, shoring up the language, and this is a good thing, and having income source in there as well. I just wanted to point out that there's typographical errors in here that are consistently put through there as that language was moved. There's a section that says gender expression age, and it's not separated by a comma. So I don't know what a gender expression age is, but it appears in every section where that is. So if that could be corrected, that'd be awesome. There are other sections of the ordinance where that language hasn't been inserted in the copy that I had over the weekend. Let me see if I can find this. Give me 1 second, please. I do have a question. In section 5871 for exceptions, there's language under number 5 that says to engage in a bona fide effort to establish or enforce affirmative action program to improve opportunities in employment for minorities and women. And as I take it as that's written, that's in violation of the affirmative action laws of the state that Mr. Barr was trying to make this consistent with. So if he could comment on that, that would be great.
Mr. Barr.
Councilmember Wilcoxon, if you would send me an email, please, with the notations from your sharp eyes, I will make those corrections for the next reading. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you both, and thank you, Council Member Somerville. Is there any other comments or discussion? All right, seeing none, Clerk Kalinga, would you please call the roll?
Mayor, we have to open the public hearing first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Public hearing.
Okay, currently there is no one with their hand raised. We can wait a few moments to see if anyone would like to make comment. It doesn't appear that anyone would like to make comment. I'll read the resolution to close public hearing. It is resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the public hearing for an ordinance entitled An Ordinance to Amend Chapter 58 of the Ypsilanti Code to provide consistent language of the definition of prohibited discrimination and to remove sections 5872 affirmative language be officially closed.
Their motion?
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion on the motion itself? Okay, I'd just like to say to Mr. Barr, thank you very much for bringing everything in this ordinance together and so that it all reads as it should. So we thank you for that. Mr. Halenga, seeing no one wanting with discussion, would you please call the roll?
So the closing of the public hearing can be done by voice vote if you'd like.
Okay. All in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Now the vote on the ordinance, on the,
Yeah.
please.
Yep. Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Come back to me, please, Andrew.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxon,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Great, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the following items be approved. Resolution number 2020-208, approving the minutes of September 15th, 2020. Resolution number 2020-209, approval of appointments to boards and commissions. Resolution number 2020-210, approving the submission of ballot for the Michigan Municipal League's Board of Directors. Resolution number 2020-211, approving ordinance 1366, an ordinance to amend section 58-61 and 58-62 of the Ypsilanti City Code to add conviction of a misdemeanor crime to a class of activity protected from discrimination on second reading.
So move.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Clerk Kalanga, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxon,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you.
All right. The next item on the agenda is approving the submission of the Connected Communities Grant application. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the city strongly supports safe and accessible mobility for its residents and visitors, and has an adopted Parks and Recreation Master Plan that notes park accessibility as a top goal in all of our parks. And whereas Recreation Park lacks an accessible entrance from the south, as well as an accessible path from the south to the path to the path system in the north. And whereas Recreation Park has a goat path circuit heavily used by runners and walkers. And whereas the Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation Commission administers the Connected Communities Grant Program that may be used to fund feasibility assessments and design work for non-motorized pathway projects. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council approves a grant application for $15,000 from the Washtenaw County Connected Communities Program to assist in design of a sidewalk and shared use path and recreation park, and a feasibility of a track and recreation park.
You've heard the resolution. Is there a motion?
I move.
Support.
It's been moved by Councilmember Wilcoxon, supported by Councilmember Somerville. Is there any discussion? Any comments? Okay. Seeing none, Clerk Kalanga, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxon,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, Council, the next item on the agenda is resolution number 2020-213, authorizing the vehicle purchase by the fire department. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the mayor and city council approved the City of Ypsilanti's fire department fiscal year 2021 budget on June 2, 2020 to include a new fire chief's vehicle within the approved budget amount of $32,000 from account number 641-7-9340-987-10. And whereas Chief Hobbs has selected the 2021 Ford base model Explorer KAB 4x4, a vehicle from Gorno Ford, a Michigan contract holder in Woodhaven, Michigan. And whereas the total cost of this purchase from Gorno Ford is $28,539 to include four floor liners with carpet and a rear cargo mat. The remaining funds will be used to install lights, sirens, and a remote start. Now therefore be it resolved that the Ypsilanti City Council authorize Fire Chief Hobbs to execute all documents associated with the purchase of Gorno Ford's 2021 Ford Explorer.
I move. Support.
Board.
It's been moved by Councilmember Wilcoxon. And was that you, Councilmember Morgan, that supported it?
I think that's Jones' hand.
I believe it was Councilmember Simmons that moved and Councilmember Wilcoxon that supported.
Oh, okay. I just heard these voices coming out. Okay, I'm glad you got that straight. All right, any discussion or comments? Do we have a
This vehicle.
presentation from Chief Hobbs? You got something you want to say to us?
No, I just want to thank you all. This has been an ongoing process we budgeted for. We started way high, and after doing our due diligence, my due diligence, this is where we ended up at, and I think it's going to be a good purchase. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm rooting for you, Chief. I'm so excited for the fire department. Long time coming.
Yeah.
So this is an electric vehicle, right?
No comment.
Alternate fuel.
Okay, Councilmember Jones Chance.
I have a question. What is the SUV used for? Like, what does it carry typically? Is it like EMS equipment and things like that?
No, I won't put EMS equipment in there because I don't respond to EMS calls, but I would respond back to the fires in the city. It can be used as a command vehicle if necessary.
Other than the four-wheel drive, is there another benefit to something this large?
Actually, there is a lot of benefit because, like I said, it has the ability to be a command vehicle. If it has the ability to be a command vehicle, like I said, lights and sirens, and there could be a lot of modifications done, but that has to be approved later on in the budget. So right now, it's just a basic vehicle. Part of the employee handbooks allows for the chief to have a vehicle, and yeah, the size is important.
Councilmember Wilcoxon.
I recall in a previous conversation, Mr. Jones Chance, that this question was asked, and I asked the question, you know, why do you need such a large vehicle? And the chief had described equipment that would be carried in the vehicle that couldn't be carried in, say, a sedan. That would be less expensive and smaller and more fuel efficient, but there were equipment requirements that wouldn't fit into a smaller vehicle. So.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes sense.
We've asked Chief Hobbs a lot of questions about this.
Actually, a lot of questions about this vehicle.
You were so close to getting out there without another one tonight. You know, I thought we were there.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Clerk Kalinga, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Jones Chance.
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxon.
Yes. Congratulations.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville.
Yes.
Mayor Richardson.
Yes, and congratulations, Chief.
Councilmember Morgan.
Yes, I'm in full support. Congratulations, Chief.
Councilmember Simmons.
Yes.
7 yes and 0 no. The motion carries.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Council, the next item on the agenda is resolution number 2020-214. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas voter traffic has increased in City Hall on election day since same-day registration was made law in Michigan, and whereas COVID-19 has caused a need for people to maintain distance as a matter of health and safety, and whereas to decrease levels of walk-ins not related to voting and to encourage City Hall staff to assist the clerk department register voters, further assisting lines move quickly and ensuring health and safety. Now therefore be it resolved that the Ypsilanti City Council that on election day, November 3rd, 2020, business at City Hall will be by appointment only to all departments other than the clerk department to maintain health and safety and election efficiency.
So move.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and supported. Was that you, Mayor Pro Tem, with the support?
Yes.
Okay. And was it Councilmember Simmons or Somerville that moved?
Somerville.
Somerville. Okay, thank you. Is there any question or discussion?
Me. Somerville.
Somerville. Okay, yes, please.
Yeah, just a quick question for the clerk. Do you think there'd be any reason why we should expand it to the day before as well? Just in case. I thought I saw I think there are discussions right now about allowing, or did that just happen today where the governor issued an executive order about the day before? Sorry, I should know this, but I was busy earlier.
what the governor signed was allowing for the beginning, basically the opening of absentee ballots, but those are for communities with a population of 25,000 or more.
So we're not included. Okay.
That would not affect us at all.
Okay, I was just curious if we should like make it 2 days or not, but unless you think that would be helpful, I don't know.
I would defer to the city manager on this. This was her resolution.
Oh, cool.
So I would, and I've been deferring to him about his workload trying to help out, but
yeah,
specifically election day, we just wanted to put it on record so that we could let the public know that, you know, we're officially only going to be open in the city clerk's office, but we have been helping anyway.
Yeah.
Staff from other departments when they're not busy or they're just taking time to lend a helping hand even now. So I believe that we probably do that leading up to the election and even the day before. Do you agree, Andrew? We'll probably continue because he will let us know if he needs an extra hand, and we'll send some staff members to his aid. We just specifically wanted to do it on election day so that everyone knows all hands on deck and he doesn't have to ask for the help.
Awesome.
Yeah, that is correct. Staff has been very, City Hall staff and, you know, staff even beyond that have been very helpful in election preparation. The request to have City Hall closed for other departments except by appointment is several City Hall staff have volunteered to register voters. So what we'll do is we'll have 3 lines set up in council chambers with floor signage and sneeze guards to register voters between 8 and 5. And then if they want to vote absentee, if same day registrations are allowed by law to also vote absentee on election day, they would come across the hall and then we'd be able to issue those ballots. It'll just keep things moving a lot more efficient. Also, we won't have a lot of traffic going upstairs. So it's to me, I don't see the need other than on election day.
And it also gives the clerk a chance to assign us to where we're needed on that day. Like you said, some will do, we're hoping it's going to pass, but some have signed up to take the day off just to be an election worker and all of that. But if he knows that we're all available, he knows that he can assign us in different areas of need.
Cool.
All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, excuse me. Seeing none, Clerk
Oh, it looks
Kalinga.
like.
Oh, I'm
Anthony.
sorry.
Sorry, looks like Anthony.
Your Councilmember Morgan.
I'm pointing to Jones' chance. You just don't see me. He had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say it's nice
Oh,
to
he's above you on my screen, so I didn't know what.
the Brady Bunch thing. I was just going to
Hollywood Square, it's more like it.
I was just going to thank staff and Andrew in particular, and just make note that it's very nice to live in a place that values voting, because there are a lot of other places that we could all be living, and well, everyone reads the news, so I'll just leave it at that.
That's true. That's true. Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, would you call the roll, please? Clerk Kalinga.
Councilmember Wilcoxon.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown. Councilmember Somerville.
Yes.
Mayor Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan.
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons.
Yes.
Councilmember Jones Chance.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. I'd just like to thank the city manager and city council for their continued support through this election season. It's been quite the ride so far.
Yes. Well, Clerk Kalinga, we're all in this together. Yeah.
Yeah, we're behind you.
Yes. Okay.
Muted. All right, the next resolution is in recognition of Indigenous Peoples Day in the city of Ypsilanti. Whereas the city of Ypsilanti recognizes that Indigenous peoples included from the Odawa, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Wyandot tribes lived upon the land and along the Huron River in our community for many hundreds of years before our city's founding. Whereas the city of Ypsilanti recognizes that dislocation, disease, war, disenfranchisement, and other atrocities devastated these communities at various times, causing most Indigenous peoples to be expelled from their homes in this area by the 1830s. And whereas today's current quality of life for Indigenous peoples across the country and here locally are of great concern. And whereas the city of Ypsilanti understands that in order to help close the equity gap, government entities and other public institutions should change their policies and practices to better reflect experiences, culture, history, and contributions of the people they serve. And whereas the second Monday of October is a federal holiday, Columbus Day, and is viewed by some as a celebration of our country's rich immigrant and, in particular, Italian and Catholic heritage. And whereas the idea of Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations in the United Nations sponsored International Conference on Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations in the Americas. And whereas in 1990, representatives from 120 indigenous nations at the First Continental Conference on 500 Years of Indian Resistance unanimously passed a resolution to transform Columbus Day into an opportunity to educate the rest of the country about pre-existing indigenous cultures that has survived an often violent colonization process and continue to exist and thrive in present-day America. And whereas the state of Alaska, the cities of Seattle, Washington, Berkeley, California, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and many others have voted to rename Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples Day to honor the culture, heritage, and contributions of Native Americans. And whereas in Michigan, Traverse City, Alpena, Ann Arbor, and Washtenaw County have voted to rename Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples Day to honor the culture, heritage, and contributions of Native Americans. And whereas the Tribal Council of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa Chippewa Indians has passed a resolution officially recognizing the Indigenous Peoples Day on the second Monday in October, and that Indigenous Peoples Day shall be used to reflect upon the ongoing struggles of Indigenous peoples on this land and to celebrate the thriving culture and value that the Odawa, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and other Indigenous peoples and to communities. Now therefore be it resolved that the city of Ypsilanti shall recognize Indigenous Peoples Day on the second Monday of October. Further be it resolved that Indigenous Peoples Day shall be used to reflect upon the ongoing struggles of Indigenous people on this land and to celebrate the thriving culture and the value that the Odawa, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and other Indigenous peoples add to the communities throughout Michigan, the Great Lakes, and all over the world. Further be it resolved that the city of Ypsilanti encourages businesses, organizations, and other public entities to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. And further be it resolved that the city of Ypsilanti encourages all Ypsilanti public schools, charter schools, and other educational facilities operated within the city to include Indigenous people-centered curricula.
I move.
Support.
It's been moved and second, supported. Any discussion? Any council member Wilcoxon?
I think this is great. I don't know why it's taken this country this long to get around to this, and I don't know why it's taken the city this long to get around to it, but this should have been done in 1977. It should have been done a long time ago, but I'll leave it at that. This is just such a weird thing.
Okay, Councilwoman Simmons.
Well, this isn't the first year we've done this. Actually, I was part of the Human Relations Commission when we brought this forward. So sorry, I don't have my calendar from me. It's been several years since we brought that forward, but we did a lot of work on that. And so, I'm glad to be a part of sponsoring, we're supporting this again this year.
So,
All right.
so wait a minute, this is a yearly thing?
That's what I just heard that.
Yeah, I mean,
why isn't this in perpetuity? I mean, if it's already been done before. Then...
Okay, Councilmember Wilcoxon, please.
Sorry.
It's okay. Councilmember Simmons, were you through?
I was just going to say well, again, my time on council has been short, but it's a yearly proclamation like we do for a lot of things each month. So
Okay.
I don't
But
think
this isn't a proclamation.
All right,
This is a-
Council Member Jones Chance, your hand was up.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think this is a good thing. On a personal note, my given name is Bapen Mokwa, which in Ojibwe means laughing bear. My great grandmother was taken from her village in Ketchikan, Alaska, at the age of 14, along with her younger brother, brought to Windsor. And then eventually she made her way to Ann Arbor and then Ypsilant, where she settled. She married a man who was also part Anishinaabe. And my great grandfather was born, and he died on First Avenue, actually. He was also sent to Mount Pleasant Indian School, where he was abused in various ways. So I think it's good to live in a place like Ypsi where we can do this, even if we have to do it every year. I think it's important to remind ourselves of some of these things that we've done, good and bad.
Thank you. Council Member Wilcoxon.
I guess I don't understand this. This is not just a proclamation for a month. This is a resolution. And if this has come up as a resolution before, then it should be an ongoing, a continual, permanent thing. And I know that we should recognize this, as I do every October. But this just seems kind of strange that this is not a permanent statement by the city. I don't understand how this is a resolution, but it's not more than a proclamation. So it's all procedural. I think this is awesome. I mean, I don't remember doing this last year.
Okay. Are you done?
Yes.
Council Member Morgan. I see you, Council Member Simmons.
I was gonna say this is long overdue. I just want to represent the League of Indian Nations of North America. My family's been here over 350 years here in American soil for the Black Indians here. So this is something that for Indigenous people, which is very broad, but those who've been here, and it's just every 25 years they enact our voting rights. I don't know why this isn't just something that's consistent. Since they gotta, this, unless it's like that. Those who have fought, who have died, who's on every street sign in every county, this is for you. We honor you, and we thank you. Thank you for this resolution, or whatever this is. It shouldn't have to be annually. It should be just like what Coxon said. It should be consistently. But thank you for the resolution. It's way overdue.
Council Member Simmons.
I was just going to say, actually, I'm sorry, Stephen, thanks for pointing. I was not quite doing the math. I was in proclamation mode because this is exactly the language of what we brought forward when I was on the HRC. Again, this probably 4 to 5 years ago. But right, when I'm reading it now, it's kind of saying, hey, we want to do this going forward. That was the point of what we did several years ago. So I was, again, kind of in proclamation mode because I was like, oh, we already did this. We're just recognizing it now, for this, well, what we do usually, when things come up in a certain month. So, but I thought Mr. Barr looked like mic'd off and maybe he had something to add.
Okay, Mr. Barr.
Well, the legal reason is because of a legal rule that one city council cannot bind another. With other holidays, national holidays, those are set out by the national government. They can make those permanent. For the city of Ypsilanti, for city council, you have to have the proclamation every year under the rule.
So there's no way we can make this permanent, is what you're telling us.
And now, that's a challenge, and I will look that up and find out. We can pass ordinances, and that may be an idea, but I'll check on it.
All right, if you would look into that for us, please, I would really appreciate it. And I think other council members also would appreciate that.
I have a question. So I'm glad that we've directed Mr. Barr to look into that because it's kind of interesting to me. I was tossing up which one do you do, a proclamation or a resolution, and so it'd be good if he brought some clarification to it, because this could also stand for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, all these things that are kind of standing already federal holidays, but we yet proclaim them or whatever we do. I think that as Councilmember Jones-Chance has said, that it's good to bring it back to our remembrance, because I think if we pass the blanket one, I think others will feel like we didn't recognize Dr. Martin Luther King's Day, you know, but we said we did that once, you know, it's just there. But I think just keeping it before us on an annual basis helps to remind us. And so that was the reason I brought it back, because I couldn't tell the difference. So that's my explanation for it.
All right, thank you. I think even if it turns out the report from Mr. Barr says that we can make all of the days of observation that we do observe, I think it would still be good to recognize them every day, even if we do recognize them in a permanent way. And I agree a lot with what Mr. Wilcoxon and Councilmember Jones-Chance and City Manager has said, that I think it's good that we do recognize them, but it would also be good if they were just there and we didn't have to dig in to recognize them annually. All right, if there are no more questions or comments, Clerk Kalinga, please call the roll.
Mr. Barr had a comment.
Barr had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Barr.
Could I get a list of the holidays that would be suggested? Someone could do that.
All right, Clerk Kalinga, could you give him a list along with your City Manager, McClellan?
I can send a list, like Martin Luther King Jr., that holiday, every year council passes a resolution. And there's been several other holidays that council has passed resolutions, not necessarily all as proclamations, but I will.
Black History Month.
I'm sorry?
I said Black History Month is another.
Yeah, History Month, Hispanic History Month. So that I'll forward all these to the city attorney.
Pride.
All right, thank you, Clerk Kalinga.
That's right, Pride Month.
Yes. I thought he heard you. Did you? Yes. Okay. If there are no other questions or comments, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville?
Yes.
Mayor Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan?
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Simmons?
Yes.
Councilmember Jones-Chance?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxon?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. And I appreciate council moving towards making all of these observations permanent. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is discussion regarding Halloween / trick-or-treating during time of COVID.
So I placed this on the agenda tonight because I didn't want to cancel Halloween without having a consensus for. And I'm glad that we didn't make any decision, because given the governor's recent executive orders, the decision, I should say, to rescind her orders, I would think that that means Halloween is open. I don't know. So I didn't want to make that decision administratively and have everyone come to each council member saying, is Halloween on? You know, what should we do? So who are you pointing at, Steve? Because you're pointing up to my staircase. You're on the end. So,
I was pointing to Nicole.
He's in the center of my screen.
Oh, he's like right at the end by my staircase. So
I'm just channeling Anthony Morgan.
No.
Right. I'm like.
No, he was letting me know. I had seen her hand. Mayor Pro Tem had her hand up. I had seen it, but he was letting me know her hand was up. Yes.
Oh,
Go
I
ahead.
thought he was saying, out the door. I was like, okay.
No.
So yeah, I just kind of wanted to, I didn't want to just make that decision administratively. I kind of, especially things being changing. I wanted to hear what the consensus of council was, and we could all say the same thing to our constituents because we will be asked.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
So I've had a few different conversations about this. And one of the things that keeps coming up and coming to mind is like, I don't know if I feel comfortable even making this type of decision about if Halloween and trick-or-treating should happen. Like, I feel like, is there not some direction from the Department of Public Health or something like that around, what would be best practice for the youth in particular, and the idea of going door to door, or some other alternative method that young people would still enjoy the trick-or-treating aspect of Halloween. So I guess I'm asking, like, it's a twofold. It's me saying, one, comment that I don't know if I feel comfortable even making that blanket decision, and then two, has there been any type of information given from the department that would kind of be the experts in this area around public health, around what they recommend maybe that we do?
Okay. Councilmember Somerville.
I don't know if Councilmember Simmons wants to go first. She had her hand up before me.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Mine's just real quick. I just feel like I personally would want to seek some guidance from the county, health department, and just, get their guidance, because I think the local health departments are kind of stepping in where the things were, rescinded from the governor. So I'm curious to know what they have to say.
Okay. So I did look something up, and it says that they're just advising to continue to maintain, 6 feet, and nothing saying that, you should stay home. So, and I brought this up to, because we were under the public health department, which was saying, we couldn't have outdoor things. And so I didn't want to, I'm kind of confused now, everything, but we're still under the Washtenaw County Public Health, which says, hey, it's still only 10. So, I can do this. We can put a notice, to say that the advice is just to maintain social distancing of at least 6 feet, wear a cloth mask, covers your mouth and nose, wash your hands often. That's kind of like what they're saying.
All right. Councilmember Somerville.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. Obviously, things have changed since Friday with the state of emergency, or not state of emergency in Michigan. I did see that the CDC recommended no trick-or-treating. So like I don't really feel comfortable like making the decision, mainly because like, who wants to take away the fun of Halloween? That's not fun. No one wants to say no to trick-or-treating. But it does seem a bit irresponsible right now. But I would like to see some direction maybe, but there hasn't been anything issued yet, which seems strange too. So I don't really know. It seems unsafe to encourage trick-or-treating. So maybe we could like put out a recommendation to discourage door-to-door trick-or-treating. I don't know. But I did see a few weeks ago that the CDC said probably not a good idea this year.
They said it was very high risk and that.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, kids take their masks off and touch their face, and yeah, it doesn't seem safe. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, but.
Councilmember Morgan.
I don't think it's my job to condone or condemn the actions of Halloween. However, I do want to say there's protests going on all across the country, and people are still in groups. There have been First Friday events. They've been having church events. This is really no different, especially when you walk in with people in your household, walking up individually to houses. Now, again, I'm not going to say whether it should or shouldn't happen. It's no different than what's already going on in different parts of the city. So whether we want to be arbitrary and say this thing having fun or whatever people consider fun is frowned upon, but I do want to, of course, we can't ignore what the CDC says, and I don't know what the CDC says about protests. Said there's groups of people. and standing around. They're not even moving. And so they're probably closer than 6 feet from people who live with them. So I think it's going to happen anyway. But I do agree with Councilwoman Somerville. If we put out a strong suggestion, not supporting it. But I think, I don't know if that will determine whether businesses, is what we determine whether the business is going to follow suit downtown, or we just giving suggestions.
Are you asking that question of city
Yes.
manager?
No, I'm just asking, like, if we say we frown upon it, will the individual businesses still take part in it, or will they follow suit?
City manager, can you?
So I would think that if we took a position, the businesses would follow suit. Because we've taken a position to support what the health department has said about, gatherings and parties outside, but people still do them, So I just feel that we should say something, because people are going to call, and at least we're all saying the same thing. They probably will do it anyway, but it's to prevent the groups. So, yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Jones-Chance.
Yeah, I guess my first question is sort of whether or not we have as city council, the authority to really do much in this regard. Frankly, I would much rather deprive kids of fun than to potentially deprive them of life. I would also say that, as far as the protesting things go, policing the free will of adults to endanger themselves is one thing, but policing the free will of adults to endanger children is another. So if we actually do have the authority to do something, we should probably, especially with the CDC's guidance being what it is, we should probably err on the side of caution. People might be upset that they don't have a good time, but they'll be a lot more upset if someone dies.
Okay. Councilmember Wilcoxon.
Thanks. Council has three different roles as I see it. One is a legislative body, in which I don't see that is the role that we're looking at this point. We don't have the ability to legislate whether people can go out at night and knock on people's doors. Enforcing that would be a nightmare on Halloween. We have a role of being servants, and we have a role of being leaders. And what we've seen in this country is that, with the pandemic, we have a significant increase in cases of COVID because of a distinct lack of leadership on the national level. So as government officials and people who can be leaders in a cultural way, but not in a legislative way, I think we need to make a clear message in terms of, we are concerned about people's public health. We can't legislate this, and we cannot, regulate it with the police force. But I think it's clear that we need to have a clear message that people's health is very important. I was asked this question by, a reporter from WEMU, and in some cases, in some ways, it could be regulated, measures could be taken, but I think a clear message from this body would go a long way to convincing people just how dangerous this is. And I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other hands? Councilmember Somerville.
I'll go quick. This is just a quick thing. Yeah, I agree with that. I think it would be good if we sent out that message, and then maybe offer like some sort of fun alternative, like a virtual costume contest for the city. I don't know. There's ways that we can make it fun for kids still. But I think it's probably best to encourage safety over. I don't know why I still have my hand raised, but sorry, I'm done.
It's okay. Let me ask this question. When is
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Councilmember Simmons had her hand up?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Go on.
Oh, thank you. No, I was just going to say that I think I'm in line with what a lot of folks are saying about, does it make sense? I mean, I don't know that we're going to necessarily stop people from doing certain things, but, we could also kind of reassess the situation come 2 weeks. Now, I don't think it's going to improve. In fact, I suspect, things could have worsened, but so I don't know that we have to necessarily make a decision today because we have one more meeting before, Halloween, but I'm more inclined to kind of discourage, Halloween kind of activities just to keep people from kind of congregating and mixing and spreading.
Okay, Councilmember Jones-Chance.
Yeah, I think I agree with that things are probably going to get worse. But maybe if we could look towards, or maybe Mr. Barr could comment on what our authority actually is, because I do agree with Mr. Wilcoxon that we do have a duty of care, especially where such little leadership has been shown nationally. And maybe giving another week to Ms. Somerville's point would give us a chance to think of some, fun alternatives.
Councilmember Morgan.
If this is Valentine's Day or any of that, we don't have to give people alternatives to fun. That's their own job. We're as a city, we're, like you said, we err on the side of safety, but our job, again, if people don't go to Sweetest Day coming up, like we don't find alternatives for them to show their loved ones they care. Like, I think that's up to the people individually, as long as they're doing it in a safe manner and we're not supporting frivolous behavior when it comes to being unsafe. But I don't think I think it's optional, but I don't think that plays a part in our role at all, giving them other options to do something that half the world don't even celebrate. So this is arbitrary fun, in my opinion, anyway.
I have a question for the city manager and city clerk, either one. When is Ipsy Glow? Has it happened already?
Let me look that up.
It has not happened yet.
Christopher's on. Christopher, what's the date? Can you unmute yourself? Okay, I'll look it up.
Okay. And the reason I asked that is because I always thought it was around the time of Halloween and or near it, and that they have some really excellent virtual things planned.
From the website, it is Friday, October 23rd from 7 around town and at home.
Right. They have some really great things that are already planned. So, and personally, I feel like it's a parental obligation to say whether to say that the kids go trick-or-treating or not, so but anyway, I do know that Ipsy Glow, they have a very fantastic program planned for this year. So, okay. Councilmember Morgan.
I just wanted to ask this question. On Halloween, is there a curfew? And if there were people 18 years old taking out younger people, that would be problematic. So is there a curfew on Halloween in the city of Ypsilant?
Councilman,
I think curfew stands. Is Chief Tony on? I think we don't do anything a special curfew. I don't believe we do.
Okay. Can 18-year-olds take out 12 and 9-year-olds? Can 18-year-olds? Are they considered adult, correct?
Well, I think the trick-or-treating was like allowed from dusk, which was like 5 till about 8 or 7.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's kind of over. And the regular 10 o'clock curfew, I believe, for teens. I think that's the time.
Okay.
Teens, yeah. Nothing special or different, rather.
Okay, I think we have pretty much hit our limit on time for this discussion. And is there anything that we would like for staff to look at, council?
Or to publish?
Right.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I guess I just kind of want to reiterate, because it seemed like there was consensus on at least encouraging no trick-or-treating. I don't know if I need to make a motion for that, but I would actually like to direct the city manager to like maybe release a statement to encourage no trick-or-treating. Obviously we can't, you know, not mandating it, but I think strongly discouraging from trick-or-treating would be something that I'm supportive of. It sounds like there were at least 5 of us that were there.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Jones Chance.
Yeah, I agree with that. If that is the limit of our authority, and maybe Mr. Barr could weigh in. If that's the limit of our authority, I think that's a good idea because children don't have the same free agency as adults, and we do have a duty of care. And so I would like to know maybe what those bounds are. And if that's the limit, I think we should do that.
Mr. Barr, do you have a word of wisdom for us?
Well, I can give you a legal word. First of all, yes, age of 18 is the age of adult in the state of Michigan. And so if you have a situation that you need an adult, an 18-year-old generally will qualify. In regard to the power of city council in regard to Halloween, you have the power to make it a holiday. You have the police power, and so you can put some restrictions on it. But generally, for the health part of it, that would be something that is, the power is vested in the health department. But you certainly have the power to make a recommendation for health and safety.
Okay, thank you. Does that help you, Councilmember Chance?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
So then I would be in support of Ms. Somerville's motion if she makes it.
Okay.
Sure, yes.
Before you make that, could I ask that the city manager and would please talk with the public health department and find out what their recommendations are, and if they have anything in their executive order that applies directly to this particular question, please. Thank you. Now I will entertain your motion.
Sure. Yeah, I make a motion to direct the city manager to issue a statement on behalf of the city to discourage trick-or-treating on October 31st, 2020. So, and I so move.
I support.
Okay. I think Councilmember Jones Chance had already said he would support. So, okay. Clerk Kalinga, would you call the roll on that motion, please? You're muted.
Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Can you come back to me, please? Sorry.
Councilmember Jones Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxon,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Can I just make a
Councilmember Wilcoxon.
I was just looking, while the discussion was going on, I looked at the county's website, and the Parks and Recreation Department has all of these Halloween events scheduled throughout the month of October. And some that require $22 registration for families and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see what the county says, what the county health department says. The Park and Rec is clearly having events where people are gathering. I don't know what that means.
They're providing actual. They're providing the ambiance, okay?
So yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay. We have another point of discussion on the agenda.
Yes, Council, the other discussion is a discussion regarding public meetings after Supreme Court ruling.
Okay, there has been, well, we had a little flurry today of, because of the Supreme Court ruling that the executive orders that the governor had issued were unconstitutional. And there's some discussion about whether or not we can continue to meet virtually or when we need to come back face to face and how we would do that. So we're bringing it up to council to discuss. And city manager, would you like to lead this discussion, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Basically, it was just because we, according to the rescission of her executive orders by the Supreme Court, we don't know if we're allowed to continue to meet virtually. So if no action is taken on the Senate level before our next meeting, that would mean that we would no longer be able to hold these virtual meetings. So we wanted to know what is the pleasure of council, seeing that we do want to maintain safety. Would council's pleasure be for us to move maybe to a bigger location where we could properly social distance, perhaps house, and then still take public comment virtually? We just want to know, in case it doesn't happen before our next meeting, what will be our alternative?
All right, Council Member Somerville.
Yeah, I guess, well, I think that regardless of what happens from the state legislature, that we should continue to host these virtually, publicly notice them for all boards, commissions, and council. I don't care if we're violating the Open Meetings Act. We can't have a proper public meeting if we meet at council or even if we met at a bigger location, because everybody's not going to be able to be accessible. People have underlying health issues. People take care of relatives who could get seriously ill or die from COVID-19. So I don't know. I think rules are meant to be broken. And in this case, we would be protecting public health. So I just think that we should stick together on this and make sure that our boards and commissions are safe, make sure that city staff is safe, and make sure that our residents actually have the ability to participate in our meetings. Because if we open up back in City Hall, that's going to limit their ability to publicly participate. And even if we move to a bigger location, not everyone will be able to attend. So I just think that, we should just keep with the virtual meetings regardless. I don't think we should wait for the state legislature.
All right, thank you. Council Member Simmons.
Yeah, I'm wondering about, again, the Washtenaw County Health Department, then, issued like other county health agencies, kind of restrictions on indoor gatherings and whatnot. And I don't know, again, I haven't done any real research here, but I don't see it just quickly looking at it of any of their exceptions. There's like a law enforcement, correctional first aid, polling places kind of exception to the limit. But other than that, it says basically indoors, you can't have more than 10 people together. So to me, that's the thing that tells us we can't. So regardless of what the Supreme Court said, I think possibly we're okay. So I would say we have the city attorney look at this and evaluate it from that standpoint, because I think that might be, the kind of, I don't want to say the out, but the thing that, helps us here.
Councilmember Wilcoxon.
I just want to call BS on the Supreme Court, but with that ruling, I think what that did was remanded it to local governments as well. There has been that conversation looming as a result of that, and so allowing us to decide what we're going to do. And in that case, I am firmly in agreement with Andy Somerville in that we should just keep doing this. People are safe. It's accommodating. There are some people that don't have access. We can work to make that happen in a better way. If that has been a problem, I haven't heard any complaints that people didn't have access to these meetings. But if that ruling does remand it to local governments, then we should take advantage of that and make that determination ourselves.
Councilmember Morgan.
Man, I do believe we can be creative. And I hate to, I know it's for all those who can, if they were inclined to, maybe if they wanted to come to city council, be for real. Like, we have an average number of people who come to these online and come in person. I guess we have, for the last 2 years, there's an average number of people. We ain't blowing the doors off unless it's something really serious. And that could be any time, so don't get me wrong. However, we could continue to do these meetings, but if we were to be in a bigger space, there has to be some creative way where people could call in, where we could limit it. I think if we're not, I do want to be in good standing. I do. But I think we're opening the doors for those who might, will, could, potentially. Everyone won't get connected or be online or come to city council. So, but we do have to prepare in case they want to. So that's the rub. But I think us meeting, whether in person with 6 feet or online, I'm good with either.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Wilcoxon, I saw your hand again.
We had talked about this before. I'll defer to Councilmember Simmons.
Because mine was up before yours. No.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
I think I must be on the other second screen. I must have second screens, you know.
You are on, well, what happens is when you move, when you go out or somebody goes out, all of mine switch around. It's like a shuffleboard. Okay, go ahead.
So the thing I want to say is, but listen, the Open Meetings Act, though, it's no like small little thing either. You know, actually, officials, public officials intentionally violate the OMA. I mean, you know, the consequences can be a misdemeanor, and also we could be personally liable. They've upped the ante on OMA than, you know, from before. So it's not, you know, I'm not winging it here on this one personally. I'm not interested in violating it. I say, you know, have Mr. Barr kind of evaluate and analyze and give us advice. I don't want to meet in person at this point. I think it's ridiculous. It makes no sense and is not safe. But I think, you know, instead of just kind of winging it and decide, you know, I think we need to understand what we're required to do. Again, I think perhaps the order by the Washtenaw County Health Department is potentially enough. But, you know, I will honor the Open Meetings Act. If you know, whatever that might mean. But I want to try to make every effort to keep this stuff going remotely until it's safe.
All right. Mr. Barr, would you please investigate this a little bit further and see if what the Washtenaw County Health Department has issued is enough for us to continue to abide by the Open Meetings Act. I believe that our meetings are open. We advertise them. They are posted, and people can come in virtually and attend. So I don't think that we're violating, or even if we, you know, continued to have them this way. But would you please investigate that and let us know what course of action we can or should take, please?
Yes, Your Honor, I certainly will. And I have been looking at this today, and I think I have a line of reasoning that will allow us to continue Zoom meetings. It has to do with an old Attorney General's opinion from about 25 years ago. It's not completely online, but it might give us a hook to continue it. But yes, I will. And I agree completely with Councilmember Simmons that we're not going to violate intentionally the Open Meetings Act, but we're going to do the best we can. And the problem is that we have different laws and different things that we have to obey, and they're not consistent. But yes, I will get on that right away.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, I appreciate that. Councilmember Somerville, did you have a comment?
Oh no, I'm just laughing.
Okay.
No one wants to join the resistance.
Yeah.
Resistance is futile, right? I just wanted to make a comment off of Mr. Morgan's comment about creative thinking. We had talked about this a while ago at a meeting, in terms of how we could fit more people into the chambers or into a different venue. And I think this was when the original executive order was going to expire after 28 days. I think we had this conversation, and we talked about having these at the Freight House and having a combination of both a live meeting and a streaming meeting. So instead of having people come up to a microphone to give public comment, they could also have a laptop or something like that. We could have Wi-Fi, and people could do that and monitor it from their seat. And I think that hybrid kind of meeting was, most people were in favor of that. So if it did come to that, I think a larger venue with a combination of streaming and live presence would be a good idea.
Okay, thank you. And with that comment, I think that takes up our time. Council Clerk Kalinga.
If I could just add one thing, depending on what facility we use, we probably would need a budget allocation to have the proper audio-visual equipment installed so we can actually provide that virtual function.
Sorry, Chief, we're taking your car back.
I think you get a fight on that one. Okay, we'll leave it in the hands of Mr. Barr and trust what he finds out for us. Thank you for the discussion. Okay, Clerk Kalinga.
Next item on the, I was about to say menu. Next item on the agenda is liaison reports and then the SEMCOG update.
Okay. Would you call out the liaisons, please? And if we would all be very succinct in our remarks, we can get out without extending the time for this meeting.
Who's the liaison for SEMCOG?
Oh, okay. You're starting with SEMCOG? That's me. Okay, SEMCOG had a meeting last week, and that was basically the last meeting for the present Kathleen LeMaco, who is the director of SEMCOG now, and SEMCOG elected the assistant director, and her name is failing me at the moment, to be the new director. And on October I believe it's October the 15th, there will be a virtual General Assembly meeting, which is open to all the public and anyone that would like to attend. And there will be a recognition of Kathleen's service. She's been at SEMCOG for a number of years under Paul Tate, and when he retired, they promoted from within. And I found out at that meeting, the last meeting, that has been going on at SEMCOG for years and years and years. So almost since it began. But anyway, that was pretty much the highlight of our meeting.
Okay, the next liaison report is Watts.
Yep. So we didn't have a meeting last month, but we have one coming up. It's on the 21st. So nothing new to report until then.
Next meeting, Urban County.
The meeting was canceled.
DDA.
Hey, good evening, Council. Upcoming on the DDA this month, we're finalizing the holiday lighting plans, which include some pretty exciting stuff at Riverside Park. We're also talking about our strategic plan. Our 2-year strategic plan has shifted quite a bit in the age of COVID, and we're going to be talking about what those new priorities look like. I think that is about it. Answer any questions. I know there was something about Ipsy Glow that came up. So happy to take any questions.
Mr. Jacobs, I'd also like to add that we're starting to think about what's going to happen to businesses in the winter. We haven't really fully discussed it, but that's been kind of lingering around the edges.
Yeah. So one thing you could expect is a request to extend the sidewalk cafe permit, not the street closure, but ways for businesses to use the sidewalks in front of their establishments to do maybe a heated outdoor dining area there. We recognize extending the street closures is perhaps not appropriate when there's perhaps only 2 or 3 businesses that want to do something outdoors throughout the winter. We're still working through that, but you can expect something later in the month about extending the sidewalk cafe permit.
Okay, next item on the agenda for liaison reports is Friends of Rutherford Pool.
Oh, that's me. The meeting is actually tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. All of the construction continues. Painters are in. The flooring is, the workers are getting staggered to get everything done. The roof is on, and they're trying to get everything done by fairly shortly. But I'll have more on the next at our next council meeting because the meeting is tomorrow evening.
All right, the next one was the Housing Equity Leadership Team, which I believe is this.
So they haven't met in over a year. I don't know what the status of them are, so there is no update.
And then the last is the Youth Community Connection.
I believe that was me. If that was that, I believe that was me when it was. Yes, it was me. I haven't followed up in some time since COVID. I know working with some of the groups that were forming it again. I know with dedicated to make a change. I've been out of the loop, so I'll do my best to get back on the ground with those reports by next council meeting.
All right, and that we close the liaison reports. The next agenda item is council proposed business.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Wilcoxon.
I talked with Ron Akers earlier about there's more and more people clamoring for speed bumps to deal with the speeding in town that has increased during COVID. And that's about it at this point. He's done a lot of, I want to thank him for doing a lot of work in terms of alleys with particular constituents and trees in neighborhoods and things like that, dead limbs, take care of those. So I just want to say Ron's doing a great job.
Thank you. Councilmember Morgan.
I'm heading to Myers when I leave here to go buy me some business. No, I just wanted to say, no, I'm sorry. No, but I have been getting a few emails about perhaps getting a place for updates to a warming center here in Ypsilant come for the winter. And so I know some constituents have been writing to me about that, and I just said that I would mention it. And I know since we don't have a homeless shelter here, and I know down by the art, the what's the name of the art building?
Riverside Arts
The Riverside Arts Center, yeah, the rack. I know that building next to them was used for that. So whatever we can do to support people when our weather changes, to be able to find indoor housing, I support all of that.
Okay, thank you. I've been getting several of those same, maybe not the same email, but questions about that. So yes, that's something that we're going to have to look at. Councilmember Somerville.
Hey everyone, two things. First, MDOT recently installed some really great traffic separators. I don't really know if there's a better name for them, but I'm gonna make sure that I do know that. They're great. They installed them on Huron all the way down through Cross Street past Eastern's campus. they've been super helpful. Traffic has slowed down tremendously. Right in front of Mr. Barr's place, they installed some so folks could cross over to get to Riverside Art Center if they were open. I will say that a few of them have already been destroyed, which proves that we needed them in the first place. So I don't know if maybe staff could follow up with MDOT and see like how we can get those reinstalled. The one closest to in front of Sweetwater's on Cross Street, like 2 days later was hit, but that's when people start to speed really badly. And then also just before the gas station on right past Huron and Cross is already gone to like the middle piece. And those are the ones that I think are making the biggest difference with traffic slowing down. Also, I think it'd be great to install those throughout some of our neighborhoods instead of the speed humps. I mean, they make a significant improvement. I'm noticing cars every time I'm driving, they're just driving much slower and safer, and they're paying attention to the pedestrians at the crosswalks, which is great, and residents love it. Everybody's very excited. I wish we could have more of it, so I'm excited to include that in my council goals for our next goal setting. But as much as MDOT wants to continue putting in, that would be cool too. I don't know, Ron, did you have anything? I see you turned your camera on.
Yes, good evening. The only thing I wanted to add is we have ordered replacements for the delineators.
Great. Great.
Just to give council a heads up, they will be coming out likely towards the end of October, early November, just the same as we pull out all the speed bumps because we're not going to be able to get the plow trucks through with them out there. But as the same with the speed bumps, they'll be reinstalled in the spring.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah, that's
Very
sad, but I guess cool.
Yeah,
At least
MDOT,
the ice slows people down a little bit.
MDOT had some unfortunate. They were supposed to install them earlier in the spring, but got delayed due to COVID. And fortunately they did get them in this year, but unfortunately it was a little late. So
Yeah, well, A for effort. But yeah, I've gotten some comments from residents about putting them on River Street and Forest. So as Steve, Councilmember Wilcoxon mentioned, because I think it's because people are like at home. I don't really know, but the speeding is really bad, especially on like the surrounding neighborhoods in Depot Town. Like I just noticed usually people are speeding through Depot Town, but obviously the street's closed off. But yeah, anyway, I'm always looking for ways to improve pedestrian safety. And then the only other thing, I just wanted to give a big shout out to Christopher Jacobs for all the work he's doing over at Park Ridge. He's been painting all week. I'm a little sore today because I helped paint for a little bit yesterday, and Ron was there as well. It's a lot of fun. I don't know, Christopher, are we close?
15 hours of painting has me feeling really old, and we are close. So,
well, we low on contractors. Well, we got to pick up staff. What is this about?
No, it's mostly volunteers, but I'm kind
Put me
of
down
make
for an
sure.
hour. I got an hour and a half for you.
Cool. We could use you tomorrow or Thursday. I think by Thursday night we'll be done.
Okay. Do you wear a tie when you paint too?
No. I look very.
That's for Mr.
casual.
Morgan. That's for Mr. Morgan.
Oh, okay.
I
most
only
people
paint
don't.
ties, bro. Only, unequivocally.
I'd just like to add that Park Ridge is getting a complete new inside, and it's been volunteer and donation. Unite Church is, I believe they're the ones that are putting in the floors, and there's several other groups that are doing other things so that the center will be completely new on the inside. WCC is buying all new furniture that can be new, can be moved. They will not replace the desk as you walk in, simply because it cannot be removed. And maybe city manager, if you would maybe look into seeing if we could find some funds to get a new front desk, that would go right with all the other new stuff that's going on in there. And it's gonna be really, really nice when they get finished with it. So thanks, Councilmember Somerville, and thank you, Mr. Jacobs, for helping to change the walls in that place. So it's going to be really nice. I'm looking forward to seeing it all done. So did you have anything else, Councilmember Somerville?
No, I think that's all.
Okay.
Just more pedestrian safety.
All right. Councilmember Jones Chance.
Yeah, actually, I want to echo most of that. I wanted to say thanks to Christopher for the work he's doing at Park Ridge, and I plan on seeing you tomorrow afternoon. I've gotten a lot of resident complaints about speeding, drag racing, motorcycles, mopeds, other vehicles down Second Ave and all the President Streets. And I want to thank Ms. Wessler and Mr. Akers and Ms. McMullen for having a conversation with me a couple weeks ago about more long-term and sustainable traffic calming solutions. I do plan to take Mr. Akers up on the digital signage, but I think maybe it's something that we can address in a more long-term fashion, slowing things down. I do also want to lift up a resident. The past few weeks, I have been out trimming trees and weeds from the fence line at Park Ridge Park with Mr. John Brown. And I just want people to know who he is and what he's all about. And when I was younger, when I went away to college, he helped our family out by, he plowed our driveway and parking lot for my great grandmother. And I just want to lift him up and let people know he's out there and who he is.
Yes. Is that
Thank
it?
you, Mr. Brown.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. And yes, a great big thank you to Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, a few years ago, Mr. Brown led the men at the park that were the Park Ridge men's group in beginning the restoration of Park Ridge Park, and they did an excellent job. They did a lot of work on the pavilion and even the park, and he works very hard to keep the weeds down and when off the fence when the city doesn't get to it quite as fast as he wants them to. So thank you for that. Okay, Council Member Simmons.
Yeah, I think the things that I've been hearing most about have been mowing kind of all summer long. And again, I appreciate, the work that Ron and his crew do. And, I know the city manager has been, I think, talking and trying to figure out strategies. And so I'm just kind of mentioning it that I think, next budget session, maybe we have to figure out and prioritize, something with kind of crews with mowing and also, snow removal, because our citizens expect us to do better with that. And I know we have, limited resources, but somehow we have to kind of prioritize it a little bit more. And, maybe that means, again, at budget time or something, we're going to have to take a look at that. But sometimes, it's like the little things. We do so many great things in the city with so few resources. Where, we've got people looking for grants and getting all kinds of great stuff with our, different facilities. But sometimes it's just like the little things, the making sure that the medians are cut, the parks are cut, and snow is shoveled, particularly when we hold them to a certain standard. And again, each house has at least, in theory, one person that lives there that is responsible. Whereas, we have a small number of people for, acres of land and probably miles of sidewalk, but still, I think we have to do better. So I'm just mentioning that as snow season's kind of coming, I know we're winding down with mowing. And like I said, I know that Mr. Akers and, City Manager McMullen, are trying to, figure this stuff out and do better with it. And so I'm just kind of saying, as for council, I think we need to, also support those efforts and try to maybe prioritize some things, when we think about the next budget, to do better with that.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion to extend?
I'll move to extend till 10:15.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and second to extend until 10:15. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I need one more.
Aye.
That's two of us. We got it.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Halinga.
Okay, what time you went? Early? Like,
Next. You're muted.
The next item on the agenda is communications from the mayor.
Okay. I have several things tonight. One, and I guess this is somewhat pretty much to the police chief. The gas station on Huron and Harriet, I'm still getting complaints about that from the residents behind there, those on Bell Street, and then the one particularly on Kramer, who is right there. She's going to be moving. She was born here in Ypsilant, has always lived here in Ypsilant, and does not want to leave, but she feels that compelled to move. She's going to be moving out of the city because of the activity there at that gas station. And she has called repeatedly about the gathering there, the drinking, the drugging, and the shooting. And I think what the last thing was that a young man that she knew and had known for quite some time was shot there. And she said after that, she just can't stay there any longer. But she is not the only person that has complained about the big crowds that gather there, and the drugs, and all of the shooting, the stabbings, and all, just the activity that goes on there. And I don't know what we could do other than maybe start looking at, is there some way that we could find the owner and hold the owner responsible for what's going on his property. I have driven past there at night, and it's really not a good sight to see all the cars parked there and all the people hanging out. Generally, most of them are young men, and well, some of them are not that young, but just the activity that's going on there. Is there anything we can do to begin to curtail that? Councilmember Jones-Chance.
Oh, yeah, and I have to apologize to you and Ms. Brown, but I have been working with Mr. Barr on that location, the Joe's Party Store and the Avenue Market. And I think the stage one right now is gathering police reports and resident complaints. And so those can be forwarded to Mr. Barr's office. Any resident complaints can be forwarded to Mr. Barr's office, and they're in the process of getting complaints from the police department. And I'm sure there will be a lot, because every time the police go to that gas station, they bring somebody back with them.
I'm sure they will. It's been going on for a long time, and actually it's just really gone on, long enough. And the activity at the Avenue Bar it's a resurgence, because that place was closed down for, not the Avenue Bar, the Avenue Store. It was closed down for, I think, a couple of years. It was really horrible before they closed down. And now, from what I heard when we were at the park with the neighbors there on Pleasant Drive, evidently it's starting up again. So hopefully we can get that and stop it before it gets too far gone. Mr. Barr, I see you are here to speak to us.
Yes, I have ordered up the police reports, and we will be looking at those items.
Okay, thank you so very much. I appreciate that. Really do. Okay. The other thing is that I have is we need to set a date, if we could, for the joint meeting with, we promised the, I believe it was Day, the housing people, that we would have a joint meeting. So could we, city manager and clerk, could you please pull together some days that, some dates and times that we could possibly meet, and we will get them to the members of Day and the other housing committee meeting members, so that we can get a date set for that soon, please, if we could. Okay. On the 8th, we will be showing the myself and the director of, the chairman of PAC, of YPAC, the Ypsilant Police Advisory Commission. We will be co-hosting the showing of the film Walking While Black, Love is the Answer. It will be at 7 o'clock. The notice went out for registration today, and the producer does require registration to come in on the Zoom, and that is for several layers of protection, and those layers are necessary. So please, please notify your residents. This is we're showing this as a prelude to the upcoming community policing town halls, which will be October the 13th and October the 27th. Both of those, that's the second and the 4 Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock. The film is going to be shown this Thursday. We showed it. It was a group at the MML convention showed it on Friday, and it was the last session of convention, and it was very well attended. There were over 88 participants that attended that session, and normally the last session of convention it's hard to find, hard to get fill up a room. I'm going to turn it over now to Clerk Kalinga. I asked him to give us a report so that those that for the public that are still here or that are zoomed in could hear and know exactly how the voting is going on in the city. Clerk Kalinga.
So since the last update I sent on Friday, we have sent 5,204 ballots, 1,454 have been returned. I spoke with Ron today about making some adjustments to the one drop box from the state. And then hopefully we'll get that deployed early next week. I just received an update from the company. I ordered the other 2 drop boxes, and I expect to have those in a couple days. And I've already reached out to Ron to get those installed when they are delivered. The Election Commission approved our list of election inspectors yesterday at 6 p.m. and we have at least the majority of polling locations has 11 inspectors. A couple have only 10. And then we have 15 at the count board. The count board will be located at the Freight House. I just received our electronic envelope opener that we're going to use in that, which can open 17,000 envelopes in an hour. So that will go quickly, and that was part of the grant funds was used to purchase that. So we are, getting we're staying on top of everything. As soon as we get absentee applications in, they go out that day. So we are well within all state law requirements. We just had some additional supplies come in from Hart, so we can have some additional batteries charged in case there's a power outage. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but then we can deploy those to the polling locations to ensure there's no lapse in voting. I ordered additional PPEs, which arrived yesterday. So those will be deployed to the polling locations as well as the count board. Let's see, what am I? I'm forgetting something. And that's all I have, unless council has any questions for me.
Does anyone have any questions for Clerk Kalinga? Okay. Council
Are you keeping
members.
yourself, Clerk? Are you keeping yourself safe?
Safe as I possibly can.
Awesome.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem or Councilmember Somerville, do you have any questions for the clerk?
No.
No.
All right, thank you. Okay, next on agenda, please.
Next on the agenda is communication from the city manager.
Thank you, Clerk Kalinga. Excuse me. Everyone should have received an email from Traliant. It's a software company that we're utilizing for our racism, diversity, and inclusion training. And I just wanted to urge council members to complete your first round, which deals with diversity. We're rolling out the second part of that, which is unconscious bias. You should have received 2 emails by now if you have not completed the first one. And they have deadlines on both of them. So I just want to remind you guys, staff is doing a good job taking them and have given me some really good feedback about them. So I just want to encourage council members to please complete those trainings. Secondly, I appreciate the comments received from Councilmember Simmons regarding mowing. I have a standing meeting with department managers each month, and Ron and I have started working on grass now, and we're trying to prioritize that task, just as we did prioritizing snow removal last year. We moved it up. So there's a little bit of reorganization going on as far as tasks to make sure that these rise in their priority in the department. So we are doing that. I'm going to be real quick. The next thing is we will be rolling out the advertisement this Friday for the Text My Gov. I believe I mentioned it to you before that we are adding another tool to allow citizens and residents to get their complaints to us regarding snow, grass, lights out, garbage, whatever, in the way of a text message. And so we have, staff has been trained on it. We've been doing all the necessary things to add that tool. And so look for an advertisement on this Friday that is going to begin rolling out. This is addition to See-Click-Fix. And we hope that it's easier for residents and staff to use to notify us of problems. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You saw me looking down. I got a text from Day. So Clerk Kalinga, when you get those dates, and our city manager, when you come up with the dates for the meetings, please, we want to forward it to those members. I had made mention of that, but someone didn't hear that and just sent a text. So are all minds clear?
Yes. I was gonna say, Mary, you look chilly. You got a sweat. You got a coat on. You're sitting up there in your jacket.
It's a blazer.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah.
cool.
Right. It's I decided I'm not gonna let DTE in my pocket just yet.
I didn't turn my heat on yet either. I got socks on.
I don't have on any socks, but I got on my jacket. So okay, if there are no further I do need one motion. Who wants
Make
to
a motion
that motion?
to adjourn.
Yes.
Support.
It's been moved in second, and the meeting. Mr. Barr, did you have something?
Yes, good night to everyone.
Night, Mr.
Thank
Barr.
you. Good
Yeah,
night.
Mr. Barr.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Stay
Brian.
safe and stay well.
Night, Chief.
I know.
Congratulations
Good
again,
night,
Chief.
y'all. Good night.
Good night,
Night,
everybody.
Good
John
night.
Boy.
Hi, Mr. Morgan.
Good night, y'all.
Hey, Steve,
Hey, how's it going?
can you play Evolution on the guitar, man?
Evolution?
Yeah, Van Halen, he died today.
What?
Yeah, Van
he-
Halen
Van
died
Halen
today.
Eddie Van Halen died?
Yeah, I saw that.
No kidding.
Van Halen.
See, you know, I was never a fan of Van Halen. I was old school before that. I was like,
Old school before that? How far back you go before that?
Well, you know.
We'll talk.
I'm not that old, but you know, I've got older. I have an older taste in music, but no, I started listening to Van Halen just kind of like in the last couple of years.
Right.
You know, it's